The knock at the door changed everything. What Daniel thought was a simple Friday night date turned into a courtroom war against a dangerous man who'd stop at nothing to maintain control. When Lena whispered those desperate words, "My kids are in the car and they haven't eaten," Daniel made a choice that would drag him into a world of hidden trackers, financial fraud, and threats that escalated with every passing day. This is a story about protection, courage, and the fight for freedom. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights of Riverside Warehouse hummed their usual Friday afternoon drone as Daniel Harper closed out the weekly inventory reports. His calloused hands moved efficiently across the keyboard. 10 years of warehouse management had taught him to appreciate the predictable rhythm of spreadsheets and shipping manifests. At 34, Daniel had built a life defined by routine and reliability, two qualities that felt like luxuries after the chaos of his early 20s. "Dad, can I get the blue controller tonight?" Mason's voice crackled through Daniel's phone speaker, already negotiating weekend privileges before Daniel had even left work. "We'll see, buddy. Depends on whether your room looks like a tornado hit it or an actual human lives there." Daniel smiled as he locked his office door, the metal click echoing through the empty corridor. "It's clean, I swear." Well, mostly clean, like 70% clean. 70% isn't a passing grade, Mason. "But it's a C-. That's technically passing," Daniel laughed, pushing through the warehouse's heavy steel door into the late September evening. The air carried that particular crispness that marked the transition from summer to fall, cool enough to feel refreshing, warm enough to skip a jacket. "Your math teacher would be proud of that logic. I'll be home in 20 minutes. Don't forget your homework." "Already done. Can we order pizza?" "Not tonight, bud. I've got that thing, remember?" A pause. Then, with the unmistakable tone of an 8-year-old delivering devastating commentary, "You mean your date? With the lady from the internet?" "It's not from the internet. It's through Sarah from accounting, and it's just dinner, so don't make it weird." "You're the one making it weird by getting all nervous about it." "I'm not nervous. You've changed your shirt 3 times this week practicing." Daniel stopped halfway to his truck. "How do you even know that?" "I have eyes, Dad. Also, you talk to yourself in the mirror. It's hilarious." "I'm hanging up now." "Love you. Don't be awkward." The line went dead, leaving Daniel shaking his head with a mixture of embarrassment and affection. Mason had inherited his mother's sharp wit and observational skills, traits that made him both delightful and occasionally too perceptive for comfort. The drive home took Daniel through the familiar streets of Millbrook, a mid-sized town that existed in that comfortable space between rural and suburban. Not small enough that everyone knew your business, but not large enough to feel anonymous. The kind of place where the grocery store clerks recognized you and the local diner still served coffee in ceramic mugs. Daniel's house sat on Maple Street, a modest 2-bedroom ranch with blue siding that needed repainting and a front porch that sagged slightly on the left side. The yard was small but maintained. Daniel took pride in keeping the grass trimmed and the flower beds weed-free, though his gardening skills ended at basic maintenance. A basketball hoop stood sentinel over the driveway, its net frayed from countless evenings of one-on-one games with Mason. Inside, Mason had indeed made an effort at cleanliness. The living room showed signs of hasty organization, couch cushions straightened, video game controllers corralled into their basket, scattered sneakers kicked into the general vicinity of the coat closet. The kitchen revealed the true story. A trail of granola bar wrappers leading to the trash can, homework papers spread across the table, and a half-finished glass of milk sweating a ring onto the counter. 70%, huh?" Daniel called out. Mason appeared in the hallway, dark hair sticking up in 5 different directions, wearing his favorite Mario Kart t-shirt for the 3rd day in a row. "I said mostly clean. You never specified which 70%. "Go change your shirt. That one could probably walk to school by itself at this point." "But it's my lucky shirt. It's a biohazard, Mason. Come on." While Mason trudged back to his room with theatrical sighs, Daniel surveyed his own appearance in the hallway mirror. Jeans, clean, no stains, relatively unwrinkled. Navy blue button-down, safe choice, not trying too hard. Hair, still thick enough to avoid embarrassment, showing just enough gray at the temples to look distinguished rather than old, or so he told himself. At 6'1", he'd maintained the broad-shouldered build from his high school football days, though the warehouse job kept him more functional fit than gym fit. "You look fine, Dad," Mason announced, returning in a fresh but equally wrinkled t-shirt. "The lady will probably think you're handsome or whatever. Her name is Lena, and thank you for that ringing endorsement." "Is she nice?" Daniel paused, realizing he didn't actually know much about his blind date beyond the basics Sarah had provided. "I think so. Sarah says she works at an advertising firm. She has kids, too." "How old?" "I don't know. Sarah didn't say." "What if they're teenagers? Teenagers are mean." "You don't even know any teenagers." "I've seen them at the mall. They walk in packs and laugh at people." Daniel knelt down to Mason's level, recognizing the anxiety beneath the jokes. Since Mason's mother, Jennifer, had passed away 4 years ago, it had been just the two of them. The idea of adding someone new to their carefully balanced dynamic brought uncertainty for both of them, though they rarely spoke about it directly. "Listen, bud, this is just dinner. Just two adults having a conversation and some food. Nothing's changing tonight, okay? You're stuck with me either way." Mason nodded, but his hands fidgeted with the hem of his shirt. "Mrs. Patterson across the street said she'd let me come over and help with her puzzle if you needed me out of the house." "I appreciate that, but I need you here, actually. The reservation isn't until 7, so Lena is coming here first. I figured we'd talk for a few minutes before heading out. That way I'm not leaving you with a total stranger if this becomes more than just one dinner. So I get to interrogate her." "Absolutely not. Can I ask her 3 questions?" "1 question, and it has to be normal." "What counts as normal?" "Not asking about her criminal record, her opinion on pineapple pizza, or whether she believes in aliens." Mason grinned. "Those are all great questions, though." The doorbell rang at exactly 6:30 p.m. Daniel felt his stomach tighten, not quite nervousness, but that particular alertness that came with new situations. He'd been on exactly 2 dates since Jennifer died, both awkward dinners that ended with polite excuses and mutual relief at never having to repeat the experience. "Showtime, Dad," Mason whispered, then darted to the couch and grabbed a comic book, attempting to look casual and failing spectacularly. Daniel opened the door, already forming a greeting, but the words died in his throat. The woman standing under the porch light looked nothing like he'd expected. Sarah had described Lena as pretty, professional, around your age, generic descriptors that could fit 1,000 people. But the woman before him seemed to carry the weight of the world in her shoulders. She was beautiful, certainly. Dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, hazel eyes that might have sparkled under different circumstances, a fitted gray jacket over a simple black dress. But it was the tension in her posture that struck Daniel first, the way her fingers gripped the strap of her purse, the way her eyes darted past him into the house, then back to the street, then to him again. "Daniel?" Her voice was soft, almost apologetic. "Lena, hi, please come in. My kids are in the car." The words tumbled out in a rush, barely above a whisper. "And they haven't eaten." Daniel blinked, processing the statement. He looked past her to the street where a silver Honda Civic sat at the curb, interior dark except for 2 small silhouettes in the back seat. "I'm sorry, what?" Lena's cheeks flushed. "I know this is... I'm so sorry. I didn't know what else to do. The babysitter canceled last minute. Well, she didn't cancel, she just didn't show up. And I couldn't get anyone else, and I thought about rescheduling, but I've already done that twice, and I didn't want you to think I was making excuses, so I brought them. But then I realized they haven't had dinner, and I can't take them to a restaurant like this. They're exhausted and probably cranky, and this is so unprofessional, and I'm rambling, and... Hey!" Daniel's voice cut through her spiral gently but firmly. "Breathe." Lena stopped, inhaled shakily. Daniel glanced back at Mason, who had abandoned all pretense of reading and was watching the interaction with wide eyes. Then he looked back at Lena, seeing something in her expression that he recognized intimately. The exhaustion of a parent stretched too thin, the shame of circumstances beyond your control, the desperate hope that someone might understand rather than judge. He'd been there. Different details, same crushing weight. "Bring them in," Daniel said. "I couldn't..." "You can. Bring them inside. We'll figure out the rest." He stepped back, opening the door wider. Lena's eyes went glossy for just a moment before she blinked it away. Are you sure? Completely sure. Go get them. She turned and walked quickly to the car, her heels clicking against the concrete. Daniel watched as she opened the back door and spoke quietly to the children inside. After a moment, two small figures emerged, a girl who looked about 6, clutching a stuffed rabbit, and a boy maybe 4 years old, rubbing his eyes against the porch light's glare. Mason appeared at Daniel's elbow. Dad, what's happening? Change of plans, bud. We're having guests for dinner. But you were supposed to go to the fancy restaurant. Plans change. You good with that? Mason studied his father's face, then looked at the approaching family, the tired woman, the sleepy kids trailing behind her. Something shifted in his expression, that particular empathy that children sometimes possess more naturally than adults. Yeah, Mason said. I'm good with that. Lena guided her children up the porch steps. Up close, Daniel could see the exhaustion more clearly. The girl's dress was wrinkled, the boy's shoes were on the wrong feet, and both had that glazed look of children who'd been waiting in a car too long. This is Emma, Lena said, her hand on the girl's shoulder. And this is Oliver. Kids, this is Mr. Harper. Daniel's fine, he said, crouching down to their level. And this is my son Mason. He's 8. But Emma hugged her rabbit tighter, but managed a small hi. Oliver just stared, thumb creeping toward his mouth. Are you guys hungry? Daniel asked. Emma nodded. Oliver's nod was more vigorous. Well, you're in luck because Friday night is taco night in this house. Mason, why don't you show Emma and Oliver where they can wash their hands? Bathroom's down the hall. Mason, rising to the occasion with surprising grace, gestured for the kids to follow him. Come on, we have the soap that smells like oranges. It's pretty cool. As the children disappeared down the hallway, Lena stood in the entryway looking like she might either cry or bolt. Daniel, I'm so sorry. This isn't how I imagined. When's the last time you ate? Daniel interrupted. The question seemed to catch her off guard. I had coffee this morning, and maybe half a granola bar around lunch. Right, so here's what's going to happen. You're going to sit down at that table. I'm going to make tacos, enough for everyone. The kids will eat, we'll eat, and then we'll talk. Sound good? You don't have to do this. I know I don't have to. I want to. Now sit. For a moment, he thought she might argue further, but then her shoulders sagged slightly, the fight draining out of her, and she moved to the kitchen table. Daniel noticed the way she chose the chair facing the front window, positioning herself where she could see the street. Can I help with anything? She asked as Daniel pulled ground beef from the refrigerator. You can relax. When's the last time someone cooked for you? Lena laughed, but it sounded hollow. I honestly can't remember. The sounds of children's voices drifted from the bathroom. Mason explaining the intricacies of the orange soap, Emma asking about the Mario poster on the wall, visible through the hallway. Normal kid sounds, gradually replacing the tension with something lighter. Daniel worked efficiently, browning the beef and adding seasoning, warming tortillas on the griddle, setting out bowls of shredded cheese, lettuce, and sour cream. The routine of cooking calmed him, gave his hands something to do while his mind processed the unusual situation. Sarah didn't mention you had kids, Lena said quietly. Sarah doesn't know everything about my life, though she'd probably argue otherwise. Daniel glanced back at her. She didn't mention yours either. I asked her not to. I don't know what I thought, that it would be easier somehow if we just met as 2 adults first. No complications. Kids aren't complications. No, but they make things complicated, especially when… She stopped abruptly, her eyes going to the window again. Daniel followed her gaze but saw only the quiet street, the neighbor's cat stalking through a hedge, the soft glow of porch lights beginning to flicker on as dusk deepened. Especially when what? Lena shook her head. Nothing. Forget it. But Daniel didn't forget it. He filed it away, that unfinished sentence, the way her jaw tightened and her fingers drummed against the table. Something was wrong. More than just a canceled babysitter and an awkward first date. The children returned, Mason proudly leading the way. Everyone's hands are clean, eyes supervised. Good man. All right, everyone, grab a plate. Tonight we build our own tacos, so pile on whatever you want. For the next few minutes, chaos of the best kind took over. Emma carefully constructed her taco with the precision of an engineer, selecting exactly 3 pieces of cheese and arranging them symmetrically. Oliver loaded his with so much sour cream it threatened to avalanche onto the plate, requiring Lena's gentle intervention. Mason demonstrated his taco eating technique, which involved unhinging his jaw like a snake and somehow consuming the entire thing in 3 bites. "Mason, we have guests," Daniel reminded him. "Maybe eat like a human being." "But this is how I always eat tacos." "This is true," Daniel admitted to Lena. "I've given up on teaching him table manners for taco night." For the first time since arriving, Lena smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes and transformed her face. "Oliver does the same thing. I think it's scientifically impossible to eat a taco with dignity." Dinner conversation flowed more easily than Daniel had anticipated. The children's presence actually helped, providing natural topics and diffusing the pressure of a traditional first date. Emma told a long, winding story about her kindergarten class's pet hamster who'd escaped and been found sleeping in the teacher's desk drawer. Oliver mostly focused on eating, but occasionally interjected with important details Emma had forgotten, like how the hamster's name was Professor Whiskers and he was very smart. Mason, usually shy around new people, seemed fascinated by having other kids at the table. "We should show them the backyard after dinner," he suggested to Daniel. "We have fireflies right now. They're everywhere." "It's a school night, bud. Maybe another time." "Please? Just for like 10 minutes? Daniel looked at Lena, who glanced at her watch and then out the window again. That same nervous check. "We really should get going soon. I've already imposed enough." "You haven't imposed at all," Daniel said, "but it's your call." Emma tugged on Lena's sleeve. "Mommy, can we see the fireflies, please? We never get to see fireflies." "Emma, we need to—" "Please?" Oliver joined the chorus. "Fireflies, fireflies." Lena's resistance crumbled visibly. "Okay, 10 minutes, but then we really do need to go." The backyard was Daniel's pride, a 1/4 acre of mostly grass with a large oak tree perfect for climbing and a wooden fence that needed staining but provided good privacy. As promised, fireflies drifted through the dusk like tiny lanterns, their bioluminescence painting the air with brief golden moments. The children scattered immediately, Mason showing Emma and Oliver how to cup their hands gently to catch the insects without hurting them. Their laughter pierced the evening quiet, pure and unself-conscious. Daniel and Lena stood on the back porch, watching. The temperature had dropped enough that Lena shivered slightly, and Daniel disappeared inside briefly to grab a flannel shirt from the coat hook. "Here," he said, offering it to her. She hesitated, then accepted, wrapping it around her shoulders. "Thank you for all of this." "You didn't have to be this kind." "Yes, I did." Most people wouldn't have. Most people would have suggested rescheduling, made it clear that showing up with kids to a date was inappropriate. It probably was inappropriate, Daniel acknowledged. But sometimes life doesn't care about appropriate. Sometimes you do what you have to do. Lena pulled the flannel tighter. "You sound like you're speaking from experience." Mason's mom died when he was 4. Brain aneurysm. No warning, just gone. For a while after, I was that parent, the one showing up to things late or with a crying kid or having to cancel at the last minute because I couldn't find childcare or Mason was sick or I was just too exhausted to function. So yeah, I get it. I'm so sorry about your wife. Ex-wife, actually. We'd been divorced for about a year when she passed, but she was still Mason's mom, and losing her wrecked him, wrecked both of us. Daniel paused. The point is, I remember what it's like to be barely holding it together and hoping someone will show you some grace instead of judgment. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Emma successfully capture a firefly and squeal with delight before releasing it. "Their father," Lena said suddenly, her voice barely audible. "He's not a good man." Daniel said nothing, just waited. "We've been separated for almost 2 years, divorced for 6 months, but he can't let go. Can't accept that it's over." Her hands gripped the porch railing. "He shows up places. My work, the kids' school. Always with some excuse. He forgot to give me a document. He needs to discuss custody arrangements. He wants to drop off a toy for the kids. But it's about control. It's always been about control." "Does he hurt you?" The question came out more sharply than Daniel intended. "Not physically. He's too smart for that. But there are other ways to hurt people, other ways to make them afraid. Have you filed for a restraining order? 3 times. He gets good lawyers. Makes himself look reasonable in court. Upstanding businessman, respected in the community, just wants what's best for his children. Meanwhile, I'm the unstable one. The woman who can't keep a job, who moves apartments every 6 months, who's clearly preventing him from seeing his kids out of spite. Bitterness crept into her voice. That's the narrative he's built, and people believe it because he's very convincing. Daniel watched Emma and Oliver chasing fireflies with Mason, their faces illuminated by brief flashes of light. Those kids don't look like they have an unstable mother. They look loved and cared for. I try, but it's hard when you're always looking over your shoulder. Is that why you keep looking at the street? You think he's watching? Lena's silence was answer enough. Daniel felt anger kindle in his chest, not the hot, explosive kind, but the cold, determined variety, the kind that settled into your bones and made you immovable. Is he out there now? I don't know, maybe. He has this way of knowing where I am. I've changed my phone 3 times. I've made sure no one at work gives out my information. But he still finds me. She turned to look at Daniel directly. I shouldn't have come here. I'm probably putting you in an impossible situation, and that's not fair to you or Mason. I should take my kids and go. Where will you go? I don't know. Somewhere. We'll figure it out. Lena. Daniel waited until she met his eyes. You don't have to figure it out alone. Not tonight. You don't even know me. I know you're a mother trying to protect her kids. I know you showed up here exhausted and scared, but still trying to do the right thing. I know your children are polite and sweet, which means you're doing something very right despite whatever hell you're going through. He gestured to the yard. Stay for a while. Let the kids play. Let yourself breathe for an hour without looking over your shoulder. Daniel, if Victor finds out I was here, let him find out. You're not doing anything wrong. You're having dinner with a friend. We're not friends. We just met. Then we're acquaintances having dinner. The point stands. Lena looked torn between gratitude and fear. In the yard, Emma was teaching Oliver how to be very still so the fireflies would land on his hands. Mason had climbed into the lower branches of the oak tree and was narrating the action like a sports commentator. 1 hour, she said finally. Then we really do need to go. But the hour stretched into 2. The children showed no signs of fatigue, instead growing more animated as they played. Mason, who usually retreated to video games after dinner, seemed energized by having companions. They played tag, explored the shed where Daniel kept his tools, and convinced the adults to start a fire in the small fire pit Daniel had built last summer. Daniel produced marshmallows and skewers, and soon they were all seated around the crackling fire, attempting the delicate art of marshmallow roasting. Emma took it very seriously, rotating her marshmallow with the focus of a surgeon. Oliver caught his on fire immediately and had to be convinced that the charred remains were still edible. Mason launched into an elaborate story about a camping trip he and Daniel had taken last year, embellishing the details until Daniel had to interrupt with corrections. It was not a bear, Mason. It was a raccoon. It was a very large raccoon, basically a bear. It was a normal-sized raccoon looking for our cooler. Okay, but it could have been a bear. Lena laughed, really laughed this time, the sound bright and unexpected. Emma and Oliver, seeing their mother genuinely happy, seemed to relax even further, leaning against her with sticky marshmallow fingers. Daniel excused himself to grab more graham crackers from the kitchen. As he rummaged through the pantry, his phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. How's it going? Is she nice? Daniel smiled and typed back. It's complicated. But good. Talk tomorrow. What does complicated mean? Tomorrow, Sarah. I promise. When he returned to the fire pit, he found the children showing Lena how to make the perfect s'more according to Mason's very specific requirements. Slightly burnt marshmallow, exactly 2 squares of chocolate, graham crackers that snap instead of crumble. Your son is very particular, Lena said as Daniel sat down beside her. That's a diplomatic way of putting it. I usually go with unnecessarily picky. I heard that, Mason called from the other side of the fire. You were meant to. The evening took on a dreamlike quality. The kind of unexpected perfect moment that sneaks up on you when you're not looking for it. Daniel couldn't remember the last time his backyard had felt this alive, this full. After Jennifer died, he and Mason had formed their tight unit of two, and it had been enough. It had to be enough. But sitting here now, listening to children's laughter blend with the crackling fire and cricket songs, Daniel realized what he'd been missing. Not romance necessarily, but companionship, community, the simple comfort of not being alone. Beside him, Lena seemed to be experiencing something similar. The tension had gradually left her shoulders. She'd stopped checking the street every few minutes. When Oliver climbed into her lap, half asleep despite his earlier energy, she held him with the kind of fierce tenderness that spoke of love tested by hardship. "Thank you for tonight," she said quietly, her voice nearly lost in the fire's pop and hiss. "I can't remember the last time things felt normal. Like we were just a family doing regular family things. You're just a family doing regular family things. You know what I mean. Without the weight, without the fear." Daniel did know. He'd lived his own version of it, the months after Jennifer's death when every normal activity felt like performance art, going through the motions while grief sat heavy on his chest. Gradually, it had eased, not disappeared but integrated, becoming part of his story rather than the whole story. "It gets easier," he said. "I know that's not particularly helpful to hear when you're in the thick of it, but it's true. Whatever you're fighting through, it won't always feel this hard." "How can you be sure?" "Because you're still fighting. That's how I know." Emma appeared at Daniel's elbow, her face serious. "Mr. Daniel, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you have a bathroom we can use? Oliver needs to go and he's too shy to ask." Daniel smiled. "Absolutely." "Mason, can you show them where the bathroom is?" As the children trooped inside, Lena pulled out her phone to check the time. Her expression shifted immediately, the peace draining from her face. "It's almost 9:30. We really need to go. School tomorrow. And they need baths and—" "Lena." She looked up. "You can come back. Tomorrow, next week, whenever. This doesn't have to be a one-time thing." "Daniel, I can't drag you into my mess." "You're not dragging me anywhere. I'm standing still, offering you a place to land when you need one. There's a difference." The children returned, Oliver rubbing his eyes, Emma trying to hide a yawn. Mason looked disappointed. "Do they really have to go?" "School night, buddy, but maybe they can come back sometime." "Really?" Emma perked up. "Can we see the fireflies again?" Lena hesitated, glancing between her children's hopeful faces and Daniel's steady gaze. "We'll see, sweetheart. Let's get your jacket." The goodbye process took another 15 minutes. Children never left anywhere quickly, involving retrieval of Emma's stuffed rabbit, Oliver's missing shoe, and promises that, yes, they could definitely roast marshmallows again sometime. Mason made Emma promise to tell her class about Professor Whisker's escape, and Emma made Mason promise to teach her how to climb trees. Finally, they were all walking toward Lena's car, parked at the curb under a streetlight. Daniel had insisted on walking them out, despite Lena's protest that it wasn't necessary. As Lena buckled Oliver into his car seat, Daniel noticed it. A dark sedan parked about 4 houses down, engine off, but someone sitting in the driver's seat, just visible in the ambient light from the street lamps. "Lena," he said quietly. "Is that him?" She didn't have to look. He saw the knowledge in the way her hands froze on the seatbelt buckle, the way her spine straightened. "I don't know. Maybe. What's the make and model of his car?" "It changes. He has several. Daniel, please just go back inside. If he sees you—" "If he sees me what? Being a decent human being? Let him look." Daniel positioned himself between the sedan and Lena's car, making his presence obvious. He wasn't trying to be confrontational, but he wasn't trying to hide either. He simply stood there, solid and unmoved, while Lena finished securing the children. The sedan didn't move, didn't start its engine, just sat there, a silent presence that felt like a threat despite its stillness. Lena closed the back door and turned to Daniel. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I'm sorry you had to see this. This is my life now. This is what I meant about always looking over my shoulder." "Does he ever approach you? Or does he just watch?" "Both. It depends on his mood, I think. Sometimes he'll just follow us for a while, making sure I know he's there. Other times he'll knock on my window at stoplights, try to have conversations through the glass. Once he showed up at Emma's school pickup and tried to take her directly from the playground. The teacher stopped him, but it terrified her. Rage, cold and focused, settled deeper into Daniel's chest. You need to document this. Photos, times, locations, everything. I have been. My lawyer says it's not enough. He's never threatened me directly, never touches me, never does anything that rises to the level of legal harassment in the court's eyes. He's just present, everywhere, all the time. Daniel pulled out his phone and quickly snapped a photo of the sedan, making sure to capture the license plate. Add this to your documentation: date, time, location. The fact that he followed you to a private residence. Daniel, I mean it. Document everything. Lena nodded, accepting his phone number when he offered it. If you need anything, he said, and I mean anything, if he shows up somewhere and you feel unsafe, if you need someone to talk to, if you just need confirmation that you're not crazy for being scared, call me, text me. Doesn't matter what time. We just met, she whispered, but without conviction. And yet here we are. Sometimes timing doesn't matter as much as we think it does. She hugged him then, briefly but tightly, and Daniel felt the tremor of fear and gratitude in her shoulders. Thank you, she breathed, for everything tonight, for seeing me, for not making me feel like I'm overreacting or being paranoid. You're not overreacting. You're responding appropriately to an inappropriate situation. Through the car window, Emma waved sleepily. Oliver was already asleep, his head lolled against the car seat. Normal kids, having had a normal evening, completely unaware of the dark sedan watching from down the street. Lena got into the driver's seat, started the engine. Daniel stepped back onto the curb but didn't return to his house. He stood there, visible under the streetlight, watching as she pulled away from the curb and drove down the street. The sedan waited until Lena's car turned the corner. Then slowly, it pulled away from the curb and followed. Daniel stood there long after both vehicles had disappeared, memorizing the license plate number, thinking through options and strategies. He wasn't a cop, wasn't a lawyer, had no particular expertise in domestic situations, but he was stubborn and protective, and he understood what it meant to be responsible for someone smaller and more vulnerable than yourself. Mason appeared in the doorway, backlit by the house lights. Dad, you okay? Daniel turned and walked back to the house, wrapping an arm around his son's shoulders. Yeah, bud, I'm okay. Did you have fun tonight? Emma's really cool. She knows all about hamsters and space, and she's read like 1,000,000 books. Can they come over again? I hope so. Is Emma's mom in trouble with that car that was watching? Daniel sometimes forgot how observant his son was. She might be, but we're going to try to help her, okay? How? I'm not sure yet, but we'll figure it out. They went inside together, Daniel locking the door behind them and, for the first time in years, double-checking the deadbolt. The house felt quiet after the evening's activity, the fire pit still smoking in the backyard, sticky marshmallow residue on the coffee table, an extra plate in the sink. Evidence of the unexpected. Evidence that life could still surprise you, even when you thought you had it all mapped out and predictable. Daniel helped Mason get ready for bed, listening to his son's continued commentary about Emma's hamster knowledge and Oliver's inability to roast marshmallows. When Mason finally fell asleep, Daniel returned to the living room and sat in the dark, thinking. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. We made it home. Thank you again for tonight. You have no idea what it meant to us. Lena Daniel typed back. Glad you're home safe. The offer stands. Anytime you need a place to breathe, you know where to find us. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, you're a good man, Daniel Harper. Mason is lucky to have you. I'm the lucky one. And for what it's worth, those kids of yours are pretty amazing. You're doing something right. A longer pause this time. Then, some days it doesn't feel like it. Some days it feels like I'm just barely keeping them safe. That's still keeping them safe. That still counts. Good night, Daniel. Good night, Lena. Daniel set his phone down and looked around his living room, at Mason's backpack slumped by the door, at the photos on the mantle showing the past 8 years of their life together, at the worn couch they'd picked out at a thrift store and somehow never replaced. This was his life. Small, manageable, safe. and he was about to willingly complicate it, potentially dangerously so, for people he'd just met. He should probably examine that impulse more carefully, question his motivations, consider the risks. But sitting there in the dark, thinking about Emma's careful taco construction and Oliver's marshmallow disasters and Lena's brief moment of laughter around the fire pit, thinking about the dark sedan following them home, Daniel found he didn't need to question anything. Some decisions you made with your head, others you made with something deeper, something that recognized pain and fear in another person and refused to look away. Outside, a car drove slowly down the street, and Daniel's hand moved instinctively to his phone. But it was just a neighbor returning from a late shift, pulling into their driveway several houses down. Still, Daniel got up and checked the locks again. Then he walked through the house, making sure windows were secure, curtains drawn. Not paranoid, just careful. Just aware that whatever had started tonight, this connection with Lena and her children, this collision of lives and circumstances, was going to require more than kindness. It was going to require courage. And possibly, Daniel thought as he finally headed to bed, the willingness to stand between danger and the people who needed protection, even if that danger came with a nice car and expensive lawyers and the veneer of respectability. He'd stood up to bullies before. Different kind, different circumstances. But the principle remained the same. Some people couldn't let go of control. And some people refused to be controlled. Daniel was firmly in the second category. And something told him Lena was fighting her way there too. She just needed someone in her corner who wouldn't flinch when things got complicated. He could be that person, would be that person. The decision settled into him with quiet certainty as he checked on Mason one more time, his son sleeping peacefully, one arm hanging off the bed, his expression content. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Maybe another appearance from the dark sedan. Maybe more of Lena's story emerging. Maybe complications Daniel couldn't yet anticipate. But tonight, 4 people had sat around a fire roasting marshmallows and laughing, and 2 exhausted children had gone home with full stomachs and happy memories. Sometimes that had to be enough. Sometimes that was everything. The weekend passed in a strange sort of limbo. Daniel found himself checking his phone more often than usual, half expecting another text from Lena, half dreading news that something had gone wrong. Mason asked about Emma and Oliver at least a dozen times, wondering aloud when they might visit again, whether they liked video games, if Emma really had read 1,000,000 books, or if that was just an exaggeration. "Can we invite them over next weekend?" Mason asked on Sunday morning, sprawled on the couch in his pajamas, watching cartoons with the volume too loud. "Maybe. We'll see how things go." Daniel was trying to assemble a bookshelf he'd bought 3 months ago and finally gotten around to opening. The instructions were in 3 languages, none of them particularly helpful. That's what you always say when you mean probably not. That's not true. "Dad, you said we'll see about getting a dog, and that was 2 years ago. The dog situation is different. Dogs need yards and walking and vet appointments. We have a yard. You walk every morning anyway, and Dr. Morris is right downtown." Daniel looked up from the incomprehensible diagram. "When did you become a lawyer?" "I'm just saying, 'we'll see' usually means no. This time it actually means we'll see. Lena has a complicated situation. It's not as simple as just inviting them over." Mason muted the television, which meant he was about to ask something serious. "Is Emma's dad mean to them?" Daniel set down the Allen wrench, giving his son his full attention. "What makes you ask that?" "Emma told me her dad is scary. She said it when we were looking at fireflies. She said she used to like fireflies, but her dad ruined them." "Ruined them how?" "She didn't say. She just got really quiet after that and changed the subject." Mason picked at a loose thread on the couch cushion. "I told her my mom died, and sometimes that makes me sad. But also I have good memories too. And she said, at least I have good memories. Then Oliver came over and we stopped talking about it." Daniel felt his chest tighten. "You're a good friend, Mason. That was the right thing to say to her." "So her dad is mean." "I think her dad has problems, and those problems affect Emma and Oliver and their mom. Are we going to help them?" "If we can. But it's complicated, like I said." Mason seemed to accept this, unmuting the television and returning to his cartoons. But Daniel noticed the way his son's expression remained thoughtful, troubled in a way that 8-year-olds shouldn't have to be troubled. His phone buzzed. A text from Lena. Are you free to talk? Not urgent, but when you have a moment. Daniel stepped into the kitchen for privacy and called her. She answered on the second ring. Hey, she said, and he could hear exhaustion in just that one syllable. I hope I'm not interrupting your Sunday. You're not. I'm attempting furniture assembly and failing spectacularly. The distraction is welcome. What's going on? A pause. Background noise that sounded like children playing. He showed up at the grocery store this morning, Victor. I was in the produce section with the kids, just buying food for the week, and suddenly he was there, blocking the end of the aisle, smiling like we'd just run into each other by coincidence. Daniel's hand tightened on the phone. What did he do? Nothing actionable. That's the problem. He asked how the kids were, commented on the bananas I was buying, said Oliver preferred the organic ones. Which is true, which means he's been watching close enough to know that detail. Then he said he noticed I'd been out late Friday night and hoped I'd enjoyed myself. He said it would be a shame if my social activities interfered with my parenting responsibilities. He followed you home Friday night, obviously, and now he's letting me know he knows, that he's watching, that he can find me anywhere, anytime. Her voice cracked slightly. Emma started crying, just stood there in the grocery store crying because she was so scared, and Victor looked at her and said, Don't cry, princess. Daddy's here now. Daddy will always be here. Like he was comforting her, like he wasn't the reason she was terrified. Where are you now? Home. We left the groceries, just walked out of the store and came home and locked all the doors. A bitter laugh. Like locks make any difference. He has keys to everywhere I've ever lived. I change the locks and somehow he gets new keys. I don't know how he does it. Daniel paced the kitchen, his mind working through possibilities. Have you called your lawyer? I left a message. It's Sunday, so I don't expect to hear back until tomorrow. And even then, what can she do? He was in a public grocery store having a conversation with his children. Technically, he violated the custody agreement by approaching us outside his scheduled visitation, but his lawyers will argue it was a chance encounter. They'll make it sound innocent. It wasn't innocent. I know that, you know that. But proving it in court is different. Did anyone else witness what happened? Store employees, other customers? Maybe. I don't know. I was too focused on getting Emma to stop crying and getting us out of there. Lena's voice dropped to almost a whisper. I'm so tired, Daniel. I'm so tired of being afraid, of teaching my children to be afraid. Emma asked me this morning if we could move to another state, somewhere Daddy couldn't find us. She's 6 years old and she's already thinking about going into hiding. Daniel leaned against the counter, wishing he was there in person instead of separated by phone lines and miles. Listen to me. You're not alone in this anymore, okay? I know we just met. I know this is all happening fast, but you have someone in your corner now who won't back down when things get hard. Daniel, I can't ask you to... You're not asking. I'm offering. There's a difference. He ran his hand through his hair, thinking, Do you have plans today? Anything you need to do? Just hide in my apartment and try to convince myself that tomorrow will be better than today. How about instead you pack a bag for you and the kids and come here? Bring clothes for tomorrow, whatever they need for school. Stay the night. Let them sleep somewhere they feel safe. Let yourself sleep somewhere you're not jumping at every sound. Silence on the other end. Then tentatively, Daniel, that's too much. We can't just move into your house. It's one night, maybe two. However long you need to regroup and figure out your next steps. I have a guest room that's basically unused storage, but we can clear it out. The kids can camp out in Mason's room. He'll be thrilled. You take the guest room, lock the door if it makes you feel better. No expectations, no pressure. Just a safe place to catch your breath. I don't want to put you in danger. You're not putting me anywhere. I'm choosing to stand where I'm standing. Daniel softened his voice. Lena, when Jennifer died, I had people tell me they were there if I needed anything. Most of them didn't mean it. Not really. It was just something people say, but a few of them actually showed up. They brought meals when I forgot to eat. They took Mason for play dates when I was too depressed to get off the couch. They sat with me in silence when I couldn't find words. Those people saved my life. Let me be that person for you. He heard her breathing, unsteady and uncertain. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. Okay, yes. We'll come. Just for tonight, though. I can't take advantage. It's not taking advantage if I'm offering freely. Pack your bags. Text me when you're on your way. And Lena, check your car before you leave. Check it for what? Anything that doesn't belong there. GPS trackers, cameras, anything unusual. You think he'd... I think better safe than sorry. Check the wheel wells, under the bumpers, anywhere something small could be attached. If you find anything, don't touch it. Take photos and call the police. The police won't do anything. I've tried before. Then at least we'll have documentation. Everything gets documented from now on, okay? Every encounter, every violation, every threat. We build a file so thick his lawyers can't wave it away. After they hung up, Daniel stood in his kitchen for a long moment, processing the weight of what he'd just committed to. He barely knew this woman. 48 hours ago, she'd been a blind date he was mildly anxious about. Now he was inviting her and her children to stay in his home, potentially putting himself and Mason in the crosshairs of a man who sounded increasingly dangerous. The smart thing would be to step back, to offer sympathy and support from a distance, but not get directly involved in what was clearly a volatile situation. But Daniel had never been particularly good at doing the smart thing when the right thing was staring him in the face. "Mason," he called into the living room. "We need to clean the guest room." Mason appeared in the doorway. "Emma and Oliver are coming?" "Yeah, bud. They're going to stay for a little while. Their apartment had some problems, and they need a place to sleep tonight." "What kind of problems?" "The kind that makes it hard to feel safe. So we're going to help them feel safe here, okay?" Mason's face lit up with an enthusiasm that made Daniel's chest ache. His son had been lonely, Daniel realized. Not unhappy exactly, but lonely in the way that only children often are. Having other kids around had awakened something in Mason, a brightness, an energy that had been muted by their quiet household of two. They spent the next 2 hours transforming the guest room from a storage dumping ground into something resembling actual sleeping quarters. Daniel moved boxes to the garage, vacuumed years of accumulated dust, changed the sheets on the bed that hadn't been used since his mother's last visit 18 months ago. Mason contributed by arranging his stuffed animals on the dresser so Emma and Oliver won't be scared at night, and drawing a welcome sign that he insisted on taping to the door. At 3:30, Lena texted, "Leaving now, found something under the car, taking photos." Daniel's stomach dropped. "What did you find?" Small black box magnetically attached inside the rear wheel well. Definitely doesn't belong to the car. "Did you call the police?" "Calling now. We'll update you soon." The next hour was agony. Daniel tried to distract himself by preparing the house, making sure there was food in the refrigerator, setting up the bathroom with clean towels. Mason hovered nearby, asking questions Daniel couldn't answer. Finally, at 4:45, Lena's car pulled into the driveway. Daniel met them outside. Lena looked wrung out, her face pale, her movements mechanical as she unbuckled the children from their car seats. Emma clutched her stuffed rabbit with white knuckles. Oliver's thumb was in his mouth, something Lena had mentioned she'd been trying to break him of. "Hey guys, Daniel said gently, crouching to their level. "Mason's really excited you're here. He cleaned his whole room, which is basically a miracle." Emma managed a small smile. Oliver just stared. Mason burst through the front door with the enthusiasm of a golden retriever. "I made you a welcome sign, and I found all my best stuffed animals for you. And Dad said we could have pizza for dinner, and we can watch a movie after. Do you like superheroes? I have like 100 superhero movies." The normality of Mason's excitement seemed to break through some of the tension. Oliver's thumb slipped from his mouth. Emma's grip on the rabbit loosened slightly. "Why don't you show them the room while your mom and I bring in the bags?" Daniel suggested to Mason. As the children disappeared inside, Daniel turned to Lena. Up close, he could see she'd been crying. "What did the police say?" "They came. They took photos. They took the device as evidence. They wrote up a report." Her voice was flat, emotionless. "They also said without proof that Victor placed it there, there's nothing they can charge him with. And since the car is technically in both our names still, we haven't finalized that part of the divorce. His lawyers could argue he had a right to monitor his own vehicle." "That's insane." "That's the law, apparently. Or at least that's how his lawyers will spin it." Lena pulled 2 overnight bags from the trunk. The officer was sympathetic. He said to document everything, Keep the report on file, and if Victor makes any direct threats to call immediately. Same advice I've heard a dozen times. Daniel took the bags from her, their fingers brushing briefly. Come inside, you look exhausted. I am exhausted. I'm exhausted down to my bones, Daniel. I'm exhausted of fighting and documenting and being scared and trying to act normal for the kids when nothing about this is normal. I know, but you're here now. For tonight at least, you can stop fighting. Let me handle the watch. She looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Gratitude mixed with something that might have been hope, or might have been the fear that hope would be crushed. Why are you doing this? Really? Daniel considered the question, searching for honesty. Because I know what it's like to feel like the world is ending, and you're the only one holding it together. Because those kids deserve to laugh without looking over their shoulders. Because you deserve the same thing. He paused. And because the guy I saw sitting in that car Friday night watching you, he reminded me of the kind of person who thinks other people are objects to be controlled. I don't like those people. He's dangerous, Daniel. I need you to understand that. He's not just controlling, he's calculating, he's patient. He'll wait months for the right moment to strike, and when he does, he makes it count. Then we'll be more calculating, more patient, and we won't give him a moment to strike. Inside, the house had already transformed into controlled chaos. Mason had set up an elaborate stuffed animal arrangement on his bedroom floor, which Emma was carefully reorganizing according to some system that made sense only to her. Oliver had discovered the toy cars Daniel kept in a basket by the television and was rolling them across the hardwood floor, making engine noises. Normal kid sounds, the kind that filled empty spaces and made a house feel lived in. Lena stood in the doorway watching them, and for the first time since arriving, some of the tension left her shoulders. They're already more relaxed here than they've been in weeks. Good, that's the goal. Daniel set the bags down in the guest room. This is you. Sorry it's not fancy. The bathroom is across the hall. Extra blankets in the closet if you get cold. Door locks from the inside if that makes you feel better. She walked into the room slowly, taking in the space, the clean sheets, the welcome sign Mason had drawn, the stuffed animals he'd arranged on the dresser. Her eyes went glassy again. You didn't have to do all this. Mason did most of it. He's been excited all day. Your son is a remarkable kid. He has his moments. Daniel leaned against the doorframe. Pizza sound good for dinner? Mason already campaigned for it, but I'm open to alternatives. Pizza sounds perfect. Dinner was louder than Friday night. The children had gotten comfortable with each other, and the conversation flowed easily between dinosaurs, school drama involving someone named Aiden, who apparently ate glue, and a lengthy debate about whether pepperoni or cheese pizza was superior. Lena barely ate, but she smiled at the right moments, encouraged the conversation, did all the things good mothers do even when they're running on empty. After dinner, while the kids watched a movie in the living room, Daniel and Lena sat at the kitchen table with coffee. The evening had settled into that quiet hour between dinner and bedtime, the house warm with the sounds of animated characters and children's laughter. I talked to my lawyer while the kids were eating, Lena said quietly. Left another message. She called back a few minutes ago. And? She wants to file an emergency motion tomorrow morning. Use the GPS tracker as evidence that Victor is escalating. Try to get a protective order that actually has teeth this time. Lena wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. She also said we need to prepare for Victor to retaliate. That's the pattern with men like him. Every time you push back, they push harder. What kind of retaliation? Could be anything. He might file for emergency custody, claim I'm unstable or exposing the kids to dangerous situations. He might show up at my work and make a scene, get me fired. He might... She stopped, her jaw tight. He might hurt someone I care about just to prove he can. Daniel understood the unspoken warning. I'm not scared of him, Lena. Maybe you should be. Being scared doesn't change anything. It just makes you easier to control. Is that what you told yourself when your wife died? That being scared didn't change anything? The question was sharp, defensive, and Daniel recognized it for what it was. A woman testing whether he'd crumble when she pushed back, whether his support was conditional. When Jennifer died, Daniel said slowly, I was terrified. Terrified of raising Mason alone. Terrified I'd screw it up. Terrified that I wasn't enough. He met her eyes. But I did it anyway. Because being scared of the responsibility didn't eliminate the responsibility. And eventually I learned that you can be terrified and still move forward. The fear doesn't have to stop you. Lena's defensive posture softened. I'm sorry, that was unfair of me. It was honest. I'd rather you be honest than polite. From the living room came a shriek of laughter. Mason had apparently done something hilarious involving a couch cushion and Oliver's apparent belief that it was a magic carpet. They sound so normal, Lena whispered, like regular kids, not kids whose mother is hiding from their father in a stranger's house. They are regular kids, and you're not hiding, you're regrouping. Semantics. Important semantics. They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the children play. Then Lena said, almost too quietly to hear, "He used to be different, Victor, when we first met. He was charming, successful, attentive, everything I thought I wanted." The control started small. Suggestions about what I should wear, comments about my friends, little adjustments to make our life better. By the time I realized what was happening, I was already isolated, already dependent on him financially, already pregnant with Emma. You don't have to explain, I need to say it. I need you to understand that I'm not some helpless victim who stumbled into abuse without noticing. I saw the signs. I ignored them. I told myself it was love, that he just cared deeply, that I was being too sensitive. Her voice hardened. And then Emma was born, and I saw the way he looked at her, like she was another thing he owned, and I knew I had to get out. It took me 2 more years to actually leave. 2 years of planning and hiding money and documenting everything until I finally had enough to file for divorce. And he spent the last 2 years trying to drag you back. Not drag me back, he doesn't want me back. He wants to punish me for leaving, for thinking I had the right to leave. Every legal motion, every custody fight, every time he shows up somewhere he shouldn't be, it's all punishment. It's all about proving that I don't get to make decisions about my own life. Daniel felt the rage again, that cold, settled anger that had nothing to do with heat and everything to do with conviction. He's wrong. He doesn't think so. Then we'll prove it to him. Lena smiled, but it was sad. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, but it's possible. And possible is enough to start with. Bedtime took an hour. 3 children instead of 1 meant 3 times the negotiating, the request for water, the bathroom trips, the sudden realizations of forgotten stuffed animals or essential blankets. But finally, Emma and Oliver were settled in sleeping bags on Mason's floor. Mason was in his own bed looking thrilled to have roommates, and Lena was tucking them all in with the practiced efficiency of a mother who'd done this routine 1,000 times. Daniel stood in the doorway watching, struck by the domesticity of it. The way Lena kissed each child's forehead, the way she whispered something that made Emma giggle, the way Oliver clutched his stuffed elephant like a lifeline. "Good night, you 3, she said softly. "Sleep well?" "Mom?" Emma's voice was small in the darkness. "Yes, sweetheart? Are we safe here?" The question hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Lena glanced at Daniel, then back at her daughter. "Yes, baby, we're safe here. Mr. Daniel is making sure of it." "Promise?" "I promise." Whether Emma believed her or was just too tired to question further, Daniel couldn't tell. But the girl settled back into her sleeping bag, rabbit tucked under her chin, and closed her eyes. In the hallway, Lena leaned against the wall and exhaled shakily. She's never asked that before. Not like that. She's processing what happened today. Kids are resilient, but they're not oblivious. "I know. I just wish—" She stopped, shook her head. "Doesn't matter what I wish. This is reality." "What do you wish?" "That I'd made different choices. That I'd seen Victor for what he was before I married him, before I had children with him. That I could give Emma and Oliver a normal childhood without fear." "You're giving them a mother who fights for them. That counts for a lot." Lena looked at him, really looked at him, and Daniel saw the exhaustion but also the steel underneath. This woman was stronger than she gave herself credit for. Battered, certainly. Tired, absolutely. But not broken. "I should let you sleep," Daniel said. "Tomorrow's going to be a long day." "Daniel, wait." She caught his arm as he turned. "Thank you. I know I keep saying it, but I don't know how else to express what this means, what you're doing for complete strangers. You're not strangers anymore. Strangers don't know that Oliver eats too much sour cream, and Emma has read 1,000,000 books. And you take your coffee with 2 sugars and no cream. That surprised a real smile from her. You noticed the coffee thing? I notice a lot of things. They stood there in the hallway, neither quite willing to step away first. Outside, a car drove past, and Daniel saw Lena's shoulders tense, her head turn automatically toward the sound. But the car continued down the street, taillights disappearing around the corner. He doesn't know you're here, Daniel said quietly. And even if he finds out, he'd have to go through me to get to you. That's what I'm afraid of. Don't be. I've dealt with bullies before. They're all the same underneath, cowards who mistake fear for respect. Victor isn't a bully. He's a man who gets off on controlling people smaller than him. That's a bully, Lena. Doesn't matter how expensive his suit is or how many lawyers he can afford. At his core, he's just a bully. She wanted to argue. He could see it in her expression, but exhaustion won out. Good night, Daniel. Good night. Lock your door if it helps you sleep. He waited until he heard the guest room door close and the lock click into place before heading to his own room. Once there, he stood at the window, looking out at the dark street. Quiet. Peaceful. No sedans lurking in the shadows, no threats visible in the night. But Daniel wasn't naive enough to think that meant safety. Victor had found Lena at the grocery store. He'd tracked her car. He knew her patterns, her routines, her vulnerabilities, and now possibly he knew about Daniel. Daniel pulled out his phone and sent a text to an old friend from his warehouse days, Marcus Chen, who'd left the warehouse job 5 years ago to work in corporate cybersecurity at a firm in the city. Hey man, I know it's late, but I need a favor. How hard is it to trace a GPS tracker back to whoever placed it? 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Marcus was a night owl. Depends on the tracker. Consumer-grade ones are easy. Professional ones are trickier, but not impossible. Why? You got car troubles? Something like that. Can we talk tomorrow? Yeah, call me during lunch. 12:30 good? Perfect. Thanks, Marcus. You in some kind of trouble, Harper? Not me. But a friend might be. I'll explain tomorrow. Cryptic. I like it. Talk tomorrow. Daniel set his phone down and changed for bed, but sleep felt impossible. His mind kept circling through scenarios, possibilities, potential threats. What if Victor showed up here? What if he tried something during the school day? What if the lawyers found a way to twist the GPS tracker into evidence against Lena rather than for her? He was still awake at midnight when he heard footsteps in the hallway. Soft, hesitant. Then a quiet knock on his door. Daniel? Lena's voice, barely above a whisper. Are you awake? He opened the door to find her standing there in the borrowed sleep clothes, one of his old t-shirts and sweatpants that were comically too long for her frame. Her hair was down, and in the dim hallway light she looked younger, more vulnerable. I can't sleep, she said. Every time I close my eyes, I see him. At the grocery store, in that car Friday night, everywhere. And I keep thinking about what he might do next, what legal motions he'll file, how he'll twist this situation to make me look unfit. Come on. Daniel stepped back, gesturing to his room. We'll talk until you're tired enough to sleep. She hesitated at the threshold. I don't want to. You're not. Come sit. Tell me about Victor's patterns. Everything you know about how he operates. If we're going to outsmart him, we need to understand him. They sat on opposite ends of Daniel's bed, backs against the wall, and Lena began to talk. She told him about Victor's family business, import/export, technically legal, but with enough gray areas to make her uncomfortable. She told him about the lawyers he kept on retainer, the private investigators he'd hired to follow her before, the way he used money as both weapon and shield. He's meticulous, she said. Everything he does, he documents. Every dollar spent on the kids, every interaction, every time I'm 5 minutes late to a custody exchange. He builds these files that make him look like father of the year and me like an incompetent mess. But the GPS tracker breaks that pattern. That's desperation, not calculation. Lena considered this. Maybe, or maybe he's escalating, testing to see what he can get away with. Either way, it's a mistake. Mistakes create opportunities. They talked for over an hour, Daniel asking questions, Lena providing details, both of them slowly assembling a fuller picture of Victor Hale. A man who'd built his life on control and couldn't tolerate the loss of it. A man who viewed his children not as people, but as leverage. A man who would rather destroy Lena than let her build a life without him. He filed the divorce papers, Lena said eventually. Not me. He filed them after I moved out, but he wrote them to make it look like he was the one ending things, like he was disgusted by my inadequacy as a wife and mother. That's how he tells the story. That he tried to make it work, but I was too damaged, too unstable, too much of a burden. And people believe him? Why wouldn't they? He's successful, well-spoken, respected in the community. I'm a woman who's changed jobs 3 times in 2 years because he keeps showing up at my workplaces and creating problems. I'm a woman who's moved apartments 4 times because I never feel safe. On paper, he looks stable, and I look like a disaster. Context matters. Context doesn't always make it into court records. Finally, around 2 in the morning, Lena's words began to slow, her eyelids growing heavy. Daniel stood and grabbed the extra blanket from his closet. Guest bed is more comfortable than sitting against a wall all night, he said gently. Go sleep. I'll stay up for a while. Make sure everything's quiet. She didn't argue this time, just nodded and shuffled back to the guest room. Daniel heard the door close, the lock click, and then silence. He stayed awake another hour, walking through the dark house, checking locks, peering through windows at the empty street. Everything remained quiet, peaceful, safe for now. But Daniel knew better than to trust peace that felt temporary. Somewhere out there, Victor Hale was planning his next move, and Daniel needed to be ready when it came. Morning came too early, announced by the sound of children's voices filtering through the walls and the smell of something burning in the kitchen. Daniel jolted awake, disoriented for a moment before remembering the previous night's conversations, the late hour he'd finally fallen asleep, the weight of responsibility he'd willingly shouldered. He found Mason in the kitchen attempting to make pancakes with Emma's supervision, while Oliver sat at the table arranging cereal pieces into elaborate patterns on his placemat. Smoke drifted from the stove where batter had dripped onto the burner. Dad, we were trying to surprise everyone with breakfast, Mason announced, looking pleased with himself despite the minor fire hazard he'd created. I see that. How about you let me take over before we need to call the fire department? Emma looked mortified. I told him the heat was too high, Mr. Daniel. I did tell him. I believe you completely. Daniel turned off the burner and opened a window to clear the smoke. Where's your mom? Still sleeping. We were being quiet so she could rest. Lena appeared in the doorway at that moment, hair disheveled, still wearing Daniel's oversized t-shirt. I heard voices and smelled smoke. Are we okay? Minor pancake incident, nothing catastrophic. Coffee? Daniel was already reaching for mugs. Please. Strong and immediate. They worked together in companionable silence, Daniel salvaging the pancake operation while Lena set the table and poured juice for the children. The domesticity of it struck Daniel again. How quickly the unfamiliar could start feeling normal when circumstances demanded it. I called the school, Lena said quietly while the children ate. Told them Emma might be late, that we had a family situation. The secretary was understanding. And your work? I'm taking a personal day. I can't focus on advertising campaigns when my life is falling apart. She wrapped her hands around her coffee mug, the same gesture from the night before. My lawyer is filing the emergency motion this morning. She wants me at her office by 10 to go over everything. I'll drive you. Daniel, you have work. I'll call in. They'll survive without me for a day. He flipped a pancake, watching it land perfectly golden side up. Small victories. Besides, you shouldn't go alone. Victor has a pattern of showing up at your lawyer's office, right? Lena nodded slowly. Last time I had a meeting there, he was waiting in the parking lot when I came out. Said he just happened to be in the neighborhood. His lawyer's office is 3 blocks away, so it was technically plausible, but it wasn't a coincidence. Nothing with Victor is a coincidence. After breakfast, while Lena got Emma and Oliver ready for school, Daniel called his supervisor at the warehouse. Tom was understanding. Daniel had worked there for a decade without ever abusing sick days or personal time, so one unexpected absence wouldn't raise eyebrows. Everything okay, Harper? Tom asked, his gruff voice carrying genuine concern. Family situation. Nothing I can't handle, but I need to be somewhere else today. Take care of it. We'll manage the inventory counts without you. Just don't make a habit of it. Wouldn't dream of it. At 12:30, after dropping the children at their respective schools with detailed instructions to the office staff about who was and wasn't authorized for pickup, Daniel called Marcus from the car while Lena sat in the passenger seat reviewing documents her lawyer had emailed. Marcus answered with his typical efficiency. Harper, talk to me about this GPS situation. Daniel explained the basics. The tracker found on Lena's car, the police report filed, the need to trace it back to its source. He kept Victor's name out of it for now, sticking to the general framework. Marcus listened without interrupting, then said, Okay, here's the deal. Consumer-grade GPS trackers, the kind you buy on Amazon for $100. Those are easy to trace. They usually connect to an app that requires account registration, email verification, payment information. If the police seize the device, they can subpoena the manufacturer for account details. And professional-grade trackers? Harder, but not impossible. Professional ones often use cellular networks or satellite, which means they leave digital footprints. The question is whether local police have the resources or inclination to follow those footprints. Marcus paused. Is this a stalking case? Yeah. Domestic? Ex-husband. Marcus's voice hardened. Then the police probably won't prioritize it. I've seen this before. They treat it like a civil matter until someone gets hurt. But here's what you can do. Get me the make and model of the tracker if you can. I have contacts who might be able to help trace it outside official channels. That's legal? Let's say it exists in a gray area. The information we find wouldn't be admissible in court without proper chain of custody, but it could point you in the right direction for building a legitimate case. Daniel glanced at Lena, who was watching him with cautious hope. I'll get you the details. Thanks, Marcus. Be careful, man. Guys who put trackers on their ex's car, they don't stop at that. It escalates. I know. You sure you want to be in the middle of this? Daniel thought about Emma asking if they were safe, about Oliver's thumb in his mouth, about Lena's exhausted determination to protect her children. Yeah, I'm sure. After hanging up, he relayed Marcus's information to Lena. She listened carefully, then pulled out her phone and scrolled through photos until she found the images from Sunday's discovery. I took pictures before the police took the device. You can see the brand name here and the model number on the back. She zoomed in, showing Daniel a small black box with a silver logo he didn't recognize. Send those to me. I'll forward them to Marcus. Daniel, if your friend finds something and it's not legal, then we use it to know where to dig legally. Marcus is right. It won't be admissible evidence, but it'll tell us what questions to ask, what subpoenas to request. Knowledge is power, even when it comes from gray areas. Lena's lawyer, Rebecca Martinez, operated out of a converted Victorian house downtown that served as offices for several small firms. She met them in a conference room lined with law books and filing cabinets, a woman in her late 40s with silver-streaked black hair and the weary expression of someone who'd fought too many uphill battles in family court. Lena, Rebecca said, standing to shake hands, and you must be Daniel. Lena mentioned you on the phone. Just here for moral support, Daniel said. Good. She needs it. Rebecca gestured for them to sit. Okay, let's get straight to it. I filed the emergency motion an hour ago requesting a protective order and modification of the custody arrangement. I included the police report about the GPS tracker, documentation of Victor's pattern of showing up at inappropriate locations, and Emma's statement to the school counselor about being afraid of her father. Lena's head snapped up. Emma talked to the school counselor? Last week, apparently. The counselor called me Friday after I'd listed the school as a contact in our previous filings. Emma told her she has nightmares about her father and doesn't want to go to his house for visitation anymore. Lena's hands trembled slightly. She didn't tell me. Kids often don't. They're trying to protect you from more stress. Rebecca's expression softened. But it's good evidence, Lena. It shows the emotional impact of Victor's behavior on the children. Judges pay attention to that. When will we hear about the motion? Daniel asked. Emergency motions get priority, so hopefully within 48 hours. But Victor's lawyers are good. They'll file an opposition arguing that Lena is alienating the children, that the GPS tracker was a reasonable safety measure for a vehicle he co-owns, that the grocery store encounter was coincidental. Rebecca leaned forward. Here's what I need you to understand. Victor is going to retaliate. That's the pattern with controlling men when they feel their grip slipping. He'll file counter motions, possibly claim Lena is unstable or exposing the children to danger. Danger from what? Lena asked. Rebecca looked uncomfortable. From new relationships, from bringing strange men around the children. Daniel felt anger spike. I'm not a strange man. I'm someone helping her. I know that. You know that. But Victor's lawyers will twist it. They'll say Lena has questionable judgment, that she's prioritizing her romantic life over her children's stability. Rebecca held up a hand as Lena started to protest. I'm not saying it's true. I'm saying it's the argument they'll make. So what do we do? Lena's voice was strained. We document everything. Every interaction with Victor, every violation of the custody agreement, every time the children express fear or discomfort. We build a file so comprehensive that his lawyers can't wave it away with smooth talking. Rebecca turned to Daniel. And you need to be prepared for scrutiny. Victor's team will look into your background, your history, looking for anything they can use. They won't find anything. I'm a warehouse manager with a clean record and an 8-year-old son. Good. Keep it that way. No confrontations with Victor, no matter how much he provokes you. Everything by the book. Rebecca shuffled papers. Now, Lena, I need you to walk me through every encounter with Victor in the last month. Every text message, every phone call, every time you saw his car in places it shouldn't be. For the next hour, Lena recounted a timeline that made Daniel's stomach churn. Victor showing up at Emma's dance recital despite it not being his custody weekend. Victor calling Lena's work and claiming to be her brother to get information about her schedule. Victor sending flowers to her apartment with cards that read things like, "The children miss their father," and "This could all be easier if you'd cooperate." That last one is particularly valuable, Rebecca noted. It's a veiled threat. Cooperate or else. Judges recognize that language. Will it be enough? Lena asked quietly. Honestly, I don't know. Victor has resources. He has lawyers who know how to make him look sympathetic, and family court is notoriously reluctant to fully restrict a parent's access unless there's evidence of direct physical harm. Rebecca's expression was gentle but realistic. But we have more ammunition now than we've had before. The GPS tracker was a mistake on his part. It shows escalation. And if we can demonstrate a pattern of psychological manipulation and control, we have a shot at getting real protection for you and the kids. When they left the lawyer's office an hour later, Lena looked drained. They sat in Daniel's truck in the parking lot, neither moving to start the engine. I feel like I'm drowning, Lena said finally. Every time I think I'm making progress, he finds a new way to drag me back under. You're not drowning. You're swimming against the current, which is different, harder, but you're still moving. What if it's not enough? What if he wins? What if the court decides that his version of events is more believable than mine? Daniel turned to face her fully. Then we appeal. And if that doesn't work, we find another way. But we don't give up, Lena. That's what he wants. For you to give up, to decide it's easier to just let him have control. Don't give him that satisfaction. She wiped at her eyes, angry at the tears. I'm so tired of crying. I'm tired of being the scared, helpless woman who needs rescuing. You're not helpless. Needing help isn't the same as being helpless. It just means you're smart enough to know you can't fight every battle alone. Before Lena could respond, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and her face went pale. It's the school, Emma's school. She answered on speaker. Hello? Mrs. Whitmore? This is Principal Davies at Riverside Elementary. We have a situation. What kind of situation? Lena's voice was tight with fear. Mr. Hale is here. He's in the office requesting to check Emma out of school for a dental appointment. However, according to our records, today is not his custody day, and we have notes about requiring your explicit permission for any early dismissals. Do not let him take her. Do not let him anywhere near her classroom. Lena was already reaching for her seatbelt. I'm coming right now. We're 15 minutes away. Mrs. Whitmore, he's becoming quite insistent. He's saying this is parental interference, that he has every right. Tell him if he doesn't leave the premises immediately, you'll call the police. I have an active motion for a protective order filed this morning. He is violating custody agreements by being there. I'll inform him. Please hurry. The line went dead. Lena looked at Daniel, her face a mixture of fear and rage. He knows. He knows we filed the motion. That's why he's doing this. He's trying to take her before the order goes through. Daniel started the truck. Then we get there first. He drove faster than he should have, cutting through traffic with controlled urgency. Lena sat rigid in the passenger seat, her phone clutched in white-knuckled hands. "Call Rebecca," Daniel said. "Tell her what's happening. She needs to document this immediately." Lena made the call, her voice mechanical as she relayed the situation. Rebecca promised to contact the court and the police to document that Victor was already violating the terms of the emergency motion within hours of it being filed. They pulled into the school parking lot 12 minutes after the call. Daniel spotted a silver Mercedes in the visitor section. Expensive, pristine, exactly the kind of car a successful businessman would drive. "That's his car," Lena confirmed. "He's still here." They rushed through the front doors to find the administrative office in controlled chaos. Principal Davies, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair, stood behind the reception desk speaking in clipped tones to a man in an impeccably tailored suit. Victor Hale looked exactly like Daniel had imagined. Mid-40s, conventionally handsome in that practiced way that came from expensive haircuts and gym memberships, the kind of symmetrical features that photograph well. But it was his eyes that struck Daniel. Cold, calculating, the eyes of someone who viewed every interaction as a transaction to be won. Those eyes shifted to Lena as she entered, and Daniel saw something flicker there. Satisfaction, maybe, or anticipation. "Lena," Victor said smoothly, his voice carrying the warm tones of someone greeting an old friend. "I'm glad you're here. Maybe you can help clear up this confusion. I'm simply trying to take Emma to her dental appointment, and the school seems to think I need your permission." "You don't have a dental appointment. You're lying." Lena's voice shook but held firm. "And you're violating the custody agreement. Today is Tuesday. Your custody days are Wednesday and every other weekend. You know this." The agreement allows for flexibility in cases of medical necessity. There is no medical necessity. Emma doesn't have a dentist appointment. You're trying to take her because you know I filed for a protective order this morning. Victor's expression shifted, the warm facade cracking slightly. "A protective order? How dramatic. What exactly are you claiming I've done, Lena? Cared about my daughter's dental health?" "You put a GPS tracker on my car. You've been following us. You showed up at the grocery store Sunday and terrified Emma so badly she cried in public. I ran into you at a grocery store where I also shop, and the car is in both our names. I have every right to ensure its safety." Victor's voice remained calm, but Daniel noticed the way his jaw tightened, the way his hands flexed at his sides. "As for Emma crying, perhaps that's because you've been poisoning her against me. Parental alienation is a serious issue, Lena. The courts don't look kindly on it." "The courts also don't look kindly on stalking and harassment," Daniel said quietly. Victor's attention snapped to him, those cold eyes assessing. "And you are?" "A friend." "How quickly you make friends, Lena. The children must be so confused by the parade of men through their lives." "There is no parade," Lena said through gritted teeth. "There's one friend who's shown me more kindness in 4 days than you showed me in 6 years of marriage." 4 days. Victor smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You've known this man for 4 days, and you're already involving him in our family business? You're already exposing our children to a stranger? That demonstrates remarkably poor judgment." Principal Davies cleared her throat. "Mr. Hale, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Mrs. Whitmore has primary custody, and without her permission or documented medical necessity, I cannot release Emma to you. I have rights, which you can exercise during your designated custody times. Today is not one of those times." The principal's voice was firm. "I've already contacted the district's legal counsel, and they've advised me that allowing you to remove Emma would potentially expose the school to liability given the circumstances. So I'm asking you politely to leave, or I will have to call the police." For a long moment, Victor stood perfectly still, his gaze moving between Lena, Daniel, and the principal. Daniel could almost see him calculating, weighing options, deciding how much he could push before it became counterproductive. "This isn't over," Victor said finally, directing the words at Lena. "You can file all the motions you want. You can hide behind lawyers and friends and school administrators, but those are my children, and I will not be cut out of their lives because you've decided to spiral." "I'm not spiraling. I'm protecting them from you." "We'll see what the court says about that." Victor adjusted his cufflinks, an oddly casual gesture that somehow made the threat feel more real. "I hope your new friend understands what he's getting into. I have considerable resources and very little patience for people who interfere in my family." "Is that a threat?" Daniel asked, stepping forward slightly. Victor smiled. It's a statement of fact. I protect what's mine. Emma and Oliver aren't yours. They're not possessions. Daniel kept his voice level, refusing to give Victor the reaction he was clearly trying to provoke. They're children who deserve to feel safe. And they will. Once I've removed them from their mother's unstable influence. Victor turned to the principal. Document that I attempted to exercise my parental rights and was prevented from doing so. My lawyers will be very interested in this conversation. I'll document everything, Mr. Hale, including the fact that you came here on a non-custody day demanding to remove a child based on a non-existent dental appointment. Victor's mask slipped for just a second, pure rage flashing across his features before he smoothed it back into cool professionalism. Good day, Principal Davies. Lena. And you... He looked at Daniel. I suggest you consider very carefully whether getting involved in this situation is worth the complications it will bring to your life. He walked out with measured steps, every movement controlled and deliberate. Through the office windows, they watched him get into the Mercedes and sit there for a moment before starting the engine and pulling away. The principal sagged slightly once he was gone. Mrs. Whitmore, I'm so sorry. We followed protocol, but I know that must have been difficult. You did everything right. Thank you for not letting him take her. Lena's voice was barely holding together. Can I see Emma? I need to make sure she's okay. Of course. I'll have her brought to my office. Principal Davies picked up her phone and made the call, then turned back to them. For what it's worth, I've been an educator for 35 years. I've seen a lot of parents, a lot of custody situations. That man, she shook her head, that man is dangerous. Not in the obvious ways, maybe, but in the ways that are harder to prove and harder to escape. Document everything. Protect those children however you can. Emma appeared a few minutes later, escorted by her teacher. The little girl's eyes were red-rimmed, and she ran straight to her mother, wrapping her arms around Lena's waist. Mommy, I heard Daddy's voice. I heard him in the office, and I got so scared. Lena knelt down, holding her daughter's face gently. I know, sweetheart, but he's gone now. He can't take you. You're safe. He said he had to take me to the dentist, but I don't have a dentist appointment. I told Mrs. Patterson that, but she said I had to stay in the classroom. Mrs. Patterson did exactly the right thing, and you're not going anywhere with Daddy unless I say it's okay. Do you understand? Emma nodded, but the fear in her eyes didn't fade. Is he going to keep trying to take us? It was the question Lena couldn't answer honestly without terrifying her daughter further. Daniel watched her struggle with it, saw the moment she decided on careful truth rather than comforting lies. Daddy is confused right now about the rules, Lena said slowly. But we have people helping us make sure the rules are clear, people like Principal Davies and our lawyer and Mr. Daniel. You don't have to worry about being taken somewhere you don't want to go. We won't let that happen. Promise? I promise. Whether it was a promise Lena could keep, Daniel didn't know. But watching Emma slowly relax, seeing the trust in the child's eyes as she believed her mother's words, Daniel felt his resolve harden into something unbreakable. Victor Hale had made a critical error today. He'd shown his hand, demonstrated that he would violate custody agreements, lie to schools, attempt to manipulate situations to his advantage. More importantly, he'd done it all within hours of the emergency motion being filed, which meant Rebecca could document a pattern of escalation happening in real time. They left the school after Principal Davies assured them she'd file a detailed incident report and forward it to both Lena's lawyer and the district's legal counsel. In the truck, Lena called Rebecca and relayed what had happened. Perfect, Rebecca said, and there was grim satisfaction in her voice. This is exactly what we needed. He couldn't help himself. He had to retaliate immediately, and he did it in the dumbest way possible. I'm amending our motion right now to include this incident. The judge is going to see a man who, within hours of an emergency protective order being filed, attempted to violate custody agreements and remove a child from school using false pretenses. Will it be enough? Lena asked. It's ammunition, Lena. Good ammunition. Keep doing what you're doing, document everything, keep the children safe, and don't engage with Victor directly if you can help it. After the call ended, they sat in the parking lot again. Emma was quiet in his back seat, clutching her rabbit. I need to pick up Oliver, Lena said quietly. His preschool ends in 20 minutes. We'll get him together, and then we're going back to my house, and you're staying there until we figure this out. Daniel, I can't keep imposing. It's not an imposition. It's strategy. Victor knows where you live. He knows your patterns. At my house, he doesn't have the same advantage. Daniel started the engine. Plus, Mason will be disappointed if Emma and Oliver aren't there when he gets home from school. He's been planning an elaborate Lego demonstration all morning, apparently. That earned a small smile from Lena. Your son is remarkably good at making the worst situations feel manageable. He gets it from me. I'm excellent at denial and distraction. You're excellent at a lot of things. Denial isn't one of them. They picked up Oliver from preschool without incident. No silver Mercedes, no Victor lurking in the parking lot. The little boy was overjoyed to see his mother and sister, chattering about the painting he'd made and the snack they'd had, and whether they could please have mac and cheese for dinner, because it was his favorite. Normal kid concerns, normal kid requests. The kind of simple, uncomplicated joy that Victor's presence always seemed to poison. Back at Daniel's house, while the children played in the backyard under Mason's watchful supervision, Lena and Daniel sat at the kitchen table. Lena's phone buzzed constantly. Texts from Rebecca with updates, emails from the school, notifications from the shared calendar app that Victor kept trying to modify to add fake appointments. He's not going to stop, Lena said, scrolling through the messages. Even if we get the protective order, even if we modify custody, he's going to keep finding ways to maintain control. That's who he is. Then we keep finding ways to block him. Eventually, he'll make a mistake big enough that even his lawyers can't fix it. Lena looked up from her phone, her expression somewhere between hopeful and skeptical. You really believe that? I do. People like Victor, they're so confident in their own cleverness that they eventually outsmart themselves. They take risks they shouldn't, they push boundaries too far, and they create the evidence needed to stop them. Daniel leaned forward. Today was a perfect example. He couldn't resist trying to take Emma. He had to prove he could still control the situation, and in doing that, he handed us exactly what we needed to prove he's unstable and manipulative. I hope you're right. I am right. Trust me. Daniel's phone rang. Marcus calling back. Hey, I need to take this. It's about the tracker. He stepped into the hallway for privacy. Marcus's voice was tense. Harper, I looked into that GPS device. The model you sent me? It's not consumer grade. It's professional surveillance equipment, the kind private investigators use. Meaning? Meaning it's expensive, sophisticated, and definitely not something you buy at Best Buy. It requires a subscription service through a security company called Sentinel Solutions. They cater to corporate clients, private investigators, and law enforcement. So how would someone like Victor get access to it? Either he hired a PI who has access, or he has connections in the security industry. Either way, this isn't amateur hour stalking. This is someone with resources who knows how to surveil people professionally. Daniel felt cold settle in his stomach. Can you trace which account the tracker was linked to? That's the interesting part. I had a contact run the serial number. The device was purchased through a corporate account registered to Hale Import Solutions. That's Victor's family business. Bingo. Which means he used company resources to stalk his ex-wife. That's a whole different level of legal exposure, Harper. If his company's insurance finds out he's using business assets for personal harassment, they'll drop him. If business partners find out, they'll distance themselves. This is leverage. Can you send me everything you found? I need to get this to Lena's lawyer immediately. I'll email you the documentation within the hour. But Harper, be careful. A guy who uses his company's security infrastructure to stalk his ex? That's someone with serious control issues and the means to act on them. Watch your back. After hanging up, Daniel returned to the kitchen where Lena was preparing snacks for the children. He relayed what Marcus had discovered, watching her face cycle through shock, vindication, and finally a fierce kind of satisfaction. His company, she breathed. He used Hale Import Solutions resources. That's a violation of corporate bylaws. His business partners will care about that. They've worked for years building the company's reputation. Exactly what Marcus said. This is more than just personal harassment. It's corporate malfeasance. Your lawyer can use this. Lena pulled out her phone and immediately called Rebecca, stepping into the living room for privacy. Daniel could hear the murmur of her voice, the excitement bleeding through as she shared the new information. Through the kitchen window, he watched the children playing. Mason had set up an obstacle course using lawn furniture, and Emma was timing Oliver's attempts with serious concentration. Simple, innocent, normal. This was what they were fighting for, Daniel realized. Not just legal victories or protective orders, but the right for these kids to have normal childhoods. The right to play without fear, to laugh without looking over their shoulders, to trust that the adults in their lives would keep them safe. He heard Lena's footsteps and turned to find her standing in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. "Rebecca says this changes everything," Lena said, her voice thick with emotion. "Corporate misuse of security equipment, violation of company policy, potential fraud if you build the tracker subscription to business expenses. She's adding it all to the amended motion, and she's confident the judge will issue the protective order now." That's good news. It's more than good news. It's the first time in 2 years I've felt like maybe I'm not fighting this battle completely alone. She crossed the kitchen and pulled Daniel into a fierce hug. "Thank you. Thank you for believing me, for helping me, for not thinking I was crazy or overreacting." Daniel held her, feeling the tremors of relief and residual fear in her shoulders. "You're not crazy. You're not overreacting. You're a mother protecting her children from someone who should have protected them but chose control instead." They stood there for a moment, the kitchen quiet except for the distant sound of children's laughter from the backyard. When Lena finally pulled back, her eyes were clearer than Daniel had seen them. "Whatever happens next," she said quietly, "whatever Victor does in retaliation, I want you to know that you've already changed our lives. You've given me hope again. You've shown my children that there are good people in the world who help without expecting anything in return." "I'm not expecting nothing in return," Daniel said honestly. "I'm expecting to see those kids grow up safe and happy. I'm expecting to watch you build the life you deserve. That's not nothing. That's everything." Outside, Mason called that dinner would be ready soon, and could they please have the fancy mac and cheese, not the box kind, because they had guests, and guests deserved fancy food. Lena laughed, the sound lighter than Daniel had heard before, and went to help with dinner preparations. As the evening settled into the comfortable chaos of 3 children and 2 adults navigating meal preparation, Daniel's phone buzzed with an email from Marcus. True to his word, he'd sent comprehensive documentation of the GPS tracker's corporate registration, purchase history, and subscription records. Daniel forwarded it all to Rebecca with a simple message. "Additional evidence for the motion. Let me know if you need anything else." Her response came within minutes. "This is gold. Judge Freeman hates corporate malfeasance. Filing amended motion now. We'll update tomorrow." That night, after the children were asleep and Lena had retreated to the guest room, Daniel sat in his living room with the lights off, looking out at the dark street. No suspicious cars, no silver Mercedes, just the quiet suburban night he'd taken for granted for so many years. But Daniel wasn't naive enough to think the quiet would last. Victor's pattern was clear: push, retaliate, escalate. The school incident and the GPS evidence would enrage him, make him feel cornered. And cornered men with resources and control issues were the most dangerous kind. Daniel's phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. "You don't know what you've gotten yourself into, Mr. Harper, but you will, soon." He stared at the message for a long moment, then screenshot it and forwarded it to both Lena and Rebecca with a timestamp and note. Documentation. Everything documented. Then he checked the locks on the doors one more time, made sure his phone was charged and within reach, and settled in for a long night of watching. If Victor wanted to escalate, Daniel would be ready. He'd been ready since the moment Lena whispered those desperate words on his doorstep about children waiting in the car. Some fights you walked away from. Others you saw through to the end, no matter what it cost. This was the latter kind. And Daniel Harper had never been very good at walking away. The threatening text message proved to be just the opening shot. Over the next 3 days, Victor launched what Rebecca grimly called a scorched earth campaign. He filed counter-motions accusing Lena of parental alienation, submitted a petition for emergency custody claiming the children were in danger, and somehow convinced a family court evaluator to request immediate home visits for both parents. "He's trying to overwhelm us," Rebecca explained during an emergency conference call Wednesday evening. Daniel sat beside Lena at his kitchen table, both of them staring at the speakerphone while the children watched a movie in the living room. File so many motions and counterclaims that we're constantly on defense, never able to build our own case. It's a classic intimidation tactic. Is it working? Lena asked, her voice tight. Only if we let it. Judge Freeman scheduled an emergency hearing for Friday morning. That's faster than I expected, which means she's taking the GPS tracker evidence seriously. Victor's lawyers probably pushed for the quick timeline, thinking they could catch us unprepared, but they don't know we have the corporate documentation. What do we need to do before Friday? Daniel asked. Lena needs to be ready to testify, to tell her story clearly, calmly, and credibly. Victor's lawyers will try to rattle her, to make her seem emotional or unstable. We need her to stay composed no matter what they throw at her. After the call ended, Lena sat motionless, staring at her hands. I don't know if I can do this. Face him in court? Answer questions about our marriage? About why I left? About every mistake I've made as a mother? You've made mistakes? Daniel asked quietly. Of course I have. Every parent makes mistakes. But Victor's lawyers will take normal parenting challenges and make them sound like abuse. They'll talk about the time I let Emma stay up too late on a school night because she was excited about her birthday, or when I forgot to pack Oliver's lunch and had to bring it to school, or the 3 jobs I've had in 2 years because Victor kept sabotaging them. Her voice cracked. They'll make me sound incompetent. But you're not incompetent. You're a mother doing her best in an impossible situation. That's not always enough in family court. Sometimes doing your best still looks like failure when you're fighting someone with unlimited resources and a talent for manipulation. Daniel reached across the table and took her hand. Listen to me. Victor's lawyers can twist facts however they want, but they can't change the truth. And the truth is that Emma and Oliver are healthy, loved, well-adjusted kids who feel safe with you and terrified of him. That truth will come through if you trust it. You sound very confident for someone who's never been through a custody battle. I'm confident in you. There's a difference. The next 2 days felt like preparation for war. Rebecca came to the house Thursday evening to run through potential questions, helping Lena practice staying calm while discussing painful topics. Daniel took the children to the park to give them privacy, listening to Mason chatter about school, while Emma and Oliver played on the swings with the kind of carefree energy that only came from not fully understanding the stakes of what was happening. Dad, Mason said during the drive home, is Emma's mom going to have to go to court? Yeah, bud, tomorrow morning. Is it scary, court? Daniel considered how to answer honestly without frightening his son. It can be, but sometimes scary things are necessary to make sure the right thing happens. And the right thing is Emma and Oliver staying with their mom. That's what we're fighting for, yes. Mason was quiet for a moment, then said with the certainty only children possess, Emma's mom is nice, she should win. Life doesn't always work that way, Mason. Sometimes nice people have to fight really hard for things that should be simple. That's dumb. Yeah, it really is. Friday morning arrived cold and gray, the kind of October weather that promised early winter. Daniel had arranged to take another day off work, and Mrs. Patterson from across the street had agreed to watch all 3 children. Mason understood the gravity of the situation, enough to promise he'd be on his best behavior and make sure Emma and Oliver didn't worry. I'll tell them a story about the fireflies, Mason said seriously as Daniel got ready. Emma likes that story. It makes her smile. Daniel pulled his son into a hug, grateful for the kid's instinctive kindness. You're a good friend, Mason. I know. You raised me right. The courthouse was an imposing brick building downtown that spoke of outdated bureaucracy and the grinding wheels of justice. Rebecca met them on the steps, looking sharp in a navy suit, carrying a briefcase thick with documentation. Okay, she said, all business. Here's what's going to happen. This is technically an emergency hearing on the protective order motion, but Victor's lawyers have turned it into a mini-trial. They're bringing witnesses. His business partner, a family therapist he hired, even his mother. They're going to paint him as a devoted father being alienated from his children. What witnesses do we have? Lena asked. You, the school principal, the investigating officer who took the GPS tracker report, and Daniel if needed. Rebecca looked at him. Victor's lawyers will argue you're biased, that you have a romantic relationship with Lena that clouds your judgment. We don't have a romantic relationship. I know, but they'll imply it anyway. Just be prepared for personal questions about your involvement in this situation. Inside, the courthouse smelled of floor polish and old paper. They passed through security and made their way to Family Court Division C, a smaller courtroom than the dramatic ones Daniel had seen on television. Wooden benches, fluorescent lighting, an American flag in the corner, and a judge's bench that looked like it had seen 40 years of custody disputes and divorce proceedings. Victor was already there with his legal team, 3 lawyers in expensive suits, all carrying matching briefcases. He sat at the defendant's table looking composed and sympathetic, every inch the wronged father. When Lena entered, he smiled sadly, as if her presence caused him pain. The performance made Daniel's skin crawl. Judge Sarah Freeman entered at 9 o'clock sharp, a black woman in her late 50s with silver-framed glasses and the expression of someone who'd heard every lie and manipulation family court could offer. She settled into her chair, reviewed the files before her, and looked up with sharp eyes. This is an emergency hearing regarding the petition for protective order filed by Lena Whitmore against Victor Hale, with concurrent emergency custody modification requests. I've reviewed the initial filings and the multiple amendments. This is a complicated situation with serious allegations on both sides. Her gaze swept the courtroom. I want to be clear from the outset. I have zero patience for games, dramatics, or attempts to waste this court's time. We're here to determine what's in the best interest of the children. Everything else is secondary. Understood? Both legal teams acknowledged understanding. Good. Ms. Martinez, you filed the initial motion. Present your case. Rebecca stood, and for the next 20 minutes she methodically laid out the evidence. The GPS tracker found on Lena's car, registered to Victor's company. The pattern of harassment documented over 18 months. The incident at the school where Victor attempted to remove Emma using false pretenses. The texts and emails that walked the line between concern and threat. Emma's statement to the school counselor about her nightmares. Victor's lead attorney, a man named Richard Thornton, who looked like he'd stepped out of a corporate law commercial, countered with smooth efficiency. Your Honor, what Ms. Martinez characterizes as harassment is actually a concerned father attempting to maintain a relationship with his children in the face of systematic alienation. The GPS device was placed on a vehicle that Mr. Hale co-owns, and for which he makes payments for legitimate safety concerns. The school incident was a misunderstanding. Mr. Hale genuinely believed he had a dental appointment scheduled. As for the children's statements, we'll present testimony showing that these fears have been implanted by Ms. Whitmore's consistent negative portrayal of their father. We'll hear testimony, Judge Freeman said. Ms. Martinez, call your first witness. Rebecca called Principal Davies, who testified clearly and without embellishment about the school incident. She described Victor's demeanor, his insistence despite having no appointment, and Emma's visible fear upon hearing her father's voice in the office. Thornton's cross-examination tried to paint Davies as biased, swayed by Lena's manipulation. Isn't it possible, Principal Davies, that Emma's fear was learned behavior, that she's been coached to react negatively to her father? I've been an educator for 35 years, Mr. Thornton, Davies said coolly. I know the difference between coached responses and genuine fear. That child was genuinely terrified. But you can't know what causes that fear, can you? You only see the child at school. I see what I see, and what I saw was a little girl afraid of her own father. Next came Officer Michael Rodriguez, who'd taken the GPS tracker report. He testified about finding the device, documenting it, and discovering its registration to Hale Import Solutions. Officer Rodriguez, Thornton said during cross-examination, is it illegal to place a GPS tracker on a vehicle you own? Not inherently, no. And Mr. Hale is a co-owner of the vehicle in question? According to the registration, yes. So no crime was committed? Rodriguez hesitated, choosing his words carefully. The legality is complex when the device is used to track a person rather than just a vehicle, especially in a domestic situation. But you're correct that we couldn't charge Mr. Hale based on vehicle ownership alone. Thank you, officer. Rebecca called Lena next, and Daniel watched her walk to the witness stand with her shoulders back and her head high. She looked small in the formal courtroom setting, but there was steel in her spine. Rebecca's direct examination was gentle, leading Lena through the history of her relationship with Victor. The early romance, the gradual increase in controlling behavior, the isolation from friends and family, the financial dependence, the fear. Can you describe the incident at the grocery store last Sunday? Rebecca asked. Lena's hands gripped the armrest of the witness chair, but her voice remained steady. I was shopping with Emma and Oliver. We were in the produce section. Victor appeared at the end of the aisle, blocking our path. He made comments about our purchases, about Oliver's banana preferences, about me being out late the previous Friday. Emma started crying immediately. She was so scared that we left all our groceries and went home. How did Victor know you'd been out late the previous Friday? Because he'd followed us. He'd watched me go to Daniel's house for our date and watched us return home later that evening. And how did that make you feel? Terrified. Violated. Like no matter what I did or where I went, I couldn't escape his surveillance. Thornton's cross-examination was brutal. He attacked every detail, questioned every decision, made every normal parenting challenge sound like evidence of incompetence. Ms. Whitmore, you've had 3 different jobs in the past 2 years. Why such instability? Because Victor kept showing up at my workplaces. He'd call my supervisors, claiming to be my emergency contact, asking about my schedule. He'd appear in parking lots and waiting areas. Eventually, employers decided I was more trouble than I was worth. Or perhaps you simply couldn't maintain steady employment due to personal issues. That's not... You've moved apartments 4 times in 2 years. Why such frequent moves? Because Victor kept getting keys somehow. I'd change locks and he'd still get in. I'd find things moved, photos taken, evidence that he'd been in my home when we weren't there. Do you have proof of these break-ins? I filed police reports. Police reports aren't proof of break-ins, Miss Whitmore. They're proof that you made reports. Did police find evidence of forced entry? No, because he had keys. How did he get these keys if you changed your locks? I don't know. That's what made it so terrifying. I didn't know how he was doing it. Thornton pounced on her raised voice. Ms. Whitmore, please calm down. Getting emotional doesn't help your case. Judge Freeman intervened. Mr. Thornton, that's enough. Ms. Whitmore is entitled to display emotion when discussing traumatic events. But the damage was done. Lena looked flustered, upset, exactly what Thornton wanted the judge to see. Daniel's hands clenched into fists as he watched from the gallery. He wanted to interrupt, to tell the judge that Thornton was manipulating the situation, making Lena's reasonable fear look like instability. But he could only sit and watch as the attorney continued his assault. You've begun a romantic relationship with Mr. Daniel Harper after knowing him for less than a week. Don't you think that shows questionable judgment when you have young children to protect? It's not a romantic relationship. Daniel is a friend who's helping us. A friend you're living with? Staying with temporarily because I don't feel safe in my own apartment. Because of your ex-husband who has never physically harmed you, never threatened you directly, and whose only crime seems to be caring about his children. His crime is stalking us, controlling us, making us afraid every moment of every day. I have no further questions, Your Honor. Lena left the witness stand looking shaken. Rebecca gave her an encouraging nod, but Daniel could see the worry in the lawyer's eyes. Thornton had landed his blows. The defense called Victor next, and his testimony was a masterclass in sympathetic manipulation. He spoke about his love for his children, his confusion at being shut out of their lives, his desperate attempts to maintain a relationship despite Lena's interference. I admit the GPS tracker was a mistake in judgment, he said, his voice heavy with regret. But I was scared. Scared that Lena was becoming unstable, that she might take the children somewhere I couldn't find them. I needed to know they were safe. And the incident at the school? Thornton prompted. A genuine misunderstanding. I had the appointment written on my calendar. I only discovered later that I'd written the wrong date. When the school refused to release Emma, I was confused and frustrated, but I left as soon as I understood the situation. Rebecca's cross-examination tried to crack his facade. Mr. Hale, you claim you placed the GPS tracker out of concern for your children's safety. But the device was tracking Ms. Whitmore's car, not specifically monitoring the children. How does that align with your stated concern? The children are almost always with their mother. Tracking the car meant tracking them. Did you inform Ms. Whitmore that you'd placed this device? No. Why not, if your intentions were innocent? Because I knew she'd object. She objects to everything I do regarding the children. Or perhaps you didn't tell her because you knew it was invasive and inappropriate. I knew she wouldn't understand my concerns. Back and forth they went, Rebecca landing some points, but Victor deflecting most with practiced ease. He was good, Daniel had to admit. He presented as reasonable, concerned, slightly wounded by circumstances beyond his control. The defense called Victor's business partner next, a man named Gerald Hutchins, who testified that Victor was a devoted father who spoke constantly about his children and seemed devastated by the custody situation. "Has Mr. Hale ever discussed his ex-wife in your presence?" Thornton asked, only to express concern about her stability and hope that she'd get the help she needs. Rebecca's cross-examination was sharp. "Mr. Hutchins, were you aware that Mr. Hale used company resources, specifically a GPS tracking device registered to Hale Import Solutions, to monitor his ex-wife's movements?" Hutchins looked uncomfortable. "I learned about that recently, yes." "And how did the company's board react to discovering that corporate security equipment was being used for personal matters?" "We're conducting an internal review." "Has Mr. Hale faced any consequences for misusing company resources?" "As I said, we're conducting a review. I can't comment further." "But you felt comfortable coming here to testify about his character as a father despite knowing he violated company policy to stalk his ex-wife?" "Objection," Thornton said. "Argumentative." "Sustained," Judge Freeman said, but her expression suggested she'd noted the point. The defense's family therapist testified about parental alienation syndrome, describing how one parent could poison children against the other through subtle and overt manipulation. It was clinical, detached, and made Lena's protective instincts sound like psychological warfare. Rebecca countered by pointing out that the therapist had never actually met Emma or Oliver, had never observed the family dynamics firsthand, and was offering opinions based solely on Victor's account of events. "So your testimony is based entirely on what Mr. Hale told you about his children's behavior?" Rebecca asked. "And on my professional experience with similar cases." "But you haven't evaluated these specific children." "No, but the patterns described are consistent with parental alienation." "Or consistent with children who are genuinely afraid of a controlling parent?" "That's possible, but less likely based on what evidence?" "Your client's word?" The therapist bristled. "Based on my professional judgment." "Thank you. No further questions." As the morning wore into afternoon, Daniel was finally called to the stand. Thornton approached him with the confidence of a hunter who'd spotted easy prey. "Mr. Harper, how long have you known Miss Whitmore?" "About a week and a half." "And in that time you've allowed her and her children to move into your home?" "I've offered them a safe place to stay during a difficult time." "How noble." "Tell me, Mr. Harper, what's the nature of your relationship with Miss Whitmore?" "We're friends." "Friends who lived together after knowing each other for 10 days?" "Friends who are helping each other through complicated situations." "Are you romantically involved with her?" "No." "Do you hope to be romantically involved with her?" Daniel met Thornton's eyes steadily. "My focus is on making sure Lena and her children are safe. Beyond that, I haven't given it much thought." You haven't thought about the future of your relationship with a woman you've allowed to move into your home with her children? That seems naive, Mr. Harper. Or maybe it seems like someone who's prioritizing the immediate crisis over hypothetical future scenarios." Thornton changed tactics. "You have a young son, correct?" "Yes. Mason, he's 8. "And you think it's appropriate to expose him to this family's drama? To potentially put him in danger by antagonizing a man like Mr. Hale?" "I think it's appropriate to teach my son that when someone needs help, you help them. I think it's appropriate to show him that standing up to bullies matters, even when it's complicated." "You consider Mr. Hale a bully?" "I consider any man who uses GPS trackers and intimidation to control his ex-wife and terrify his children to be exactly that." "Objection," Thornton snapped. "The witness is offering opinions on matters he has no expertise in." "Sustained," Judge Freeman said. "Mr. Harper, please stick to factual observations." But Daniel saw something flicker in the judge's expression. Interest, maybe, or recognition that beneath the legal maneuvering someone was speaking plain truth. Rebecca's redirect was brief. "Mr. Harper, you've observed Ms. Whitmore with her children over the past week. Can you describe their interactions?" "She's patient, loving, and completely focused on their well-being. Emma and Oliver clearly feel safe with her. They laugh, they play, they act like normal kids when they're not worried about their father showing up. And when they are worried about their father showing up. Emma gets quiet and anxious. Oliver's thumb goes in his mouth. They both check windows and doors obsessively. They're 6 and 4 years old, and they've learned to be afraid. That's not normal. That's not healthy. Thank you, Mr. Harper. Judge Freeman called a brief recess, and Daniel joined Rebecca and Lena in the hallway. Lena looked exhausted, wrung out from hours of testimony and cross-examination. How bad is it? She asked Rebecca. It's not over yet. We have closing arguments still. But I won't lie. Thornton landed some good shots. The judge is hard to read, so we might lose. We might, but we also might win. Freeman takes child welfare seriously, and the GPS tracker evidence is damning. Plus, Daniel's testimony was strong. He came across as credible and genuinely concerned rather than romantically motivated. When they returned to the courtroom, both sides presented closing arguments. Thornton painted Victor as a devoted father trapped in a nightmare of false accusations and parental alienation, fighting desperately to maintain a relationship with children being poisoned against him by an unstable ex-wife. Rebecca countered with a clear-eyed summary of the facts. Your Honor, this case isn't about a father fighting for his rights. It's about a man who cannot accept that he no longer controls his ex-wife's life. The GPS tracker, the workplace harassment, the school incident, the constant surveillance, these aren't the actions of a concerned parent. They're the actions of someone who views his children and their mother as property to be monitored and controlled. Emma and Oliver deserve to feel safe. Right now they don't. This court has the power to change that. Judge Freeman listened to both arguments without expression, then sat back in her chair. I'm going to take a brief recess to review the evidence and testimony. We'll reconvene in 30 minutes for my ruling. Those 30 minutes felt like hours. Daniel, Lena, and Rebecca sat on a bench in the courthouse hallway, not speaking, each lost in their own thoughts. Down the hall, Victor conferred with his legal team, looking confident and composed. Finally, the bailiff called them back in. Judge Freeman was already at the bench, her expression grave. I've reviewed the evidence and considered the testimony carefully, she began. This is a difficult case with two competing narratives. On one hand, we have a father claiming he's being unfairly excluded from his children's lives. On the other, we have a mother claiming she's protecting her children from psychological harm and harassment. Daniel felt Lena's hand find his under the table, her grip tight. What tips the balance for me, Judge Freeman continued, is the GPS tracking device. Mr. Hale's explanation that it was a safety measure doesn't hold water when the device was hidden from Ms. Whitmore's knowledge, registered to his company rather than purchased personally, and used in conjunction with a pattern of appearing at locations where Ms. Whitmore happened to be. That's surveillance, not safety. That's control, not concern. Victor's jaw tightened, but his expression remained neutral. Furthermore, the incident at the school troubles me deeply. Regardless of whether Mr. Hale genuinely believed he had an appointment, his insistence on removing the child despite school protocol and outside his custody time suggests an inability to respect boundaries. When we add Principal Davies' testimony about Emma's visible fear and the child's own statements to the school counselor, a concerning picture emerges. Judge Freeman looked directly at Victor. Mr. Hale, I believe you love your children, but love without respect for boundaries becomes control. Control without accountability becomes abuse, even if it never manifests physically. Your actions over the past months demonstrate a pattern of invasive behavior that is not in your children's best interests, regardless of your intentions. She turned to her written order. Therefore, I am granting the protective order. Mr. Hale, you are prohibited from appearing at Miss Whitmore's residence, workplace, or the children's schools outside of scheduled custody exchanges. You are prohibited from contacting Miss Whitmore except through your attorneys or a court-approved communication app regarding custody matters only. Your Honor, Thornton stood. We respectfully request that custody arrangements remain unchanged. I'm not finished, Mr. Thornton. Freeman's voice was sharp. Custody is modified as follows. Until a full psychological evaluation can be conducted on both parents and both children, Mr. Hale's visitation will be supervised. 1 4-hour visit per week, supervised by a court-approved monitor, location to be determined by the monitor to ensure neutral ground. Victor's composure finally cracked, shock and rage flashing across his features. Your Honor, this is my ruling, Mr. Hale. You can appeal it through proper channels. But until and unless it's overturned, these are the terms. Freeman's gaze was unwavering. I'm also ordering a full investigation into the misuse of corporate resources for personal surveillance. Mr. Thornton, I suggest your client cooperate fully with both the internal company review and any potential regulatory investigations. She signed the order with firm strokes. This court takes the emotional well-being of children seriously. Emma and Oliver have expressed fear, and that fear appears legitimate based on the evidence presented. Until Mr. Hale can demonstrate that he can respect boundaries and put his children's emotional needs above his desire for control, supervised visitation is appropriate. When can we schedule the psychological evaluations? Rebecca asked. The court will appoint evaluators within 1 week. Both parents will be required to participate. The children will be evaluated in age-appropriate ways. We'll reconvene in 60 days to review the results and determine if any further modifications are necessary. Freeman looked at both parties. I strongly encourage both of you to use this time constructively. Mr. Hale, work with a therapist on accepting boundaries. Miss Whitmore, work on healing from this trauma while maintaining stability for your children. These kids need parents who can coexist peacefully for their sake, even if the marriage is over. She banged her gavel. Court is adjourned. The courtroom erupted in quiet motion. Victor's legal team immediately began conferring with him, their voices low and urgent. Rebecca gathered her files with barely contained satisfaction, and Lena sat frozen, as if she couldn't quite believe what had just happened. We won, she whispered. We actually won. You won, Rebecca corrected. You stood up there and told your truth, and the judge believed you. Daniel felt the tension he'd been carrying for days finally release. It wasn't a complete victory. Supervised visitation wasn't the same as full protection, but it was progress. Real, meaningful progress that would give Lena and her children breathing room. They were gathering their belongings when Victor approached, his lawyers trailing behind, looking uncomfortable. His face was a mask of barely controlled fury. This isn't over, Lena, he said quietly, his voice tight. You think you've won something, but all you've done is delay the inevitable. Mr. Hale, Rebecca stepped between them. The court has issued a protective order. I suggest you respect it. I'm simply speaking to the mother of my children. No, you're violating the order before the ink is even dry. Step away or I'll call the bailiff. Victor's eyes shifted to Daniel, cold and calculating. You think you're a hero, protecting the damsel in distress? You have no idea what you've stepped into. I know exactly what I've stepped into, Daniel said calmly, and I'm not going anywhere. We'll see about that. A bailiff noticed the confrontation and started over. Victor's lead attorney put a hand on his shoulder. Victor, not here. Let's go. For a moment, Daniel thought Victor might ignore his lawyer, might escalate right there in the courthouse. But years of practice control reasserted itself. Victor smoothed his expression, nodded curtly, and walked away with his legal team flanking him like protective guards. That was a threat, Lena said, her voice shaking. That was a desperate man lashing out because he lost control, Rebecca countered. Document it, but don't let it overshadow what we accomplished today. You have a protective order. You have supervised visitation only. You have 60 days to build your case further while he has to prove he can respect boundaries. This is a win, Lena, a real one. Outside the courthouse, autumn sunlight broke through the gray clouds, warming the cold afternoon. Daniel called Mrs. Patterson to let her know they were on their way back. In the background, he could hear Mason's voice explaining something elaborate about Lego architecture to Emma. How are the kids? Lena asked anxiously. Happy, Mrs. Patterson reported. They've been building an entire city in your living room, Daniel. Fair warning, you may never get your floor space back. Worth it, Daniel said. The drive home was quiet, all three of them processing what had happened. Rebecca had stayed behind to file additional paperwork, but promised to call later with next steps. For now, it was just Daniel and Lena, the afternoon light slanting through the truck windows, the weight of the courtroom finally lifting. Thank you, Lena said as they pulled onto Maple Street, for everything, for testifying, for being there, for not backing down when Victor tried to intimidate you. You don't need to thank me. Yes, I do. Most people would have walked away by now, would have decided this was too messy, too complicated, too risky. But you stayed. Daniel pulled into his driveway and put the truck in park. I stayed because walking away wasn't an option. Not for me. Maybe I'm stubborn, or maybe I just recognize when something matters enough to see it through. Either way, I'm not going anywhere, Lena. Not until this is finished and you and those kids are safe. She leaned over and kissed his cheek, brief and soft. You're a good man, Daniel Harper. I'm a man who's doing what should be normal, what everyone should do when someone needs help. Well, it's not normal, but I'm grateful for it anyway. They went inside to find the living room transformed into an elaborate Lego metropolis. Mason had apparently appointed himself mayor, Emma was the chief architect, and Oliver was in charge of making the cars go zoom, which seemed to involve significant property damage to the more delicate structures. Mom! Emma jumped up and ran to Lena. We built a whole city with a hospital and a school and a park and everything. I can see that. It's amazing. Lena knelt to examine the construction, genuinely interested despite her exhaustion. Mason looked at his father with barely contained curiosity. So, what happened? Good things, Daniel said. Complicated, but good. That seemed to satisfy Mason, who returned to his mayoral duties. Emma and Oliver, picking up on their mother's lighter mood, relaxed into their play. The afternoon passed in the easy chaos of children and Legos and the simple comfort of being somewhere safe. Later, after dinner and baths and the lengthy process of getting 3 children settled for bed, Daniel and Lena sat on the back porch watching fireflies drift through the darkening yard. The judge said 60 days for the evaluation, Lena said quietly. 60 days before we're back in court, before Victor can petition for custody changes again. 60 days is a long time. A lot can change in 60 days. Or nothing can change, and we're right back where we started. That's not going to happen. You don't know that. No, Daniel admitted, but I believe it, and sometimes belief is enough to start with. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fireflies paint the night with brief golden moments. Somewhere in the house, a child laughed, the sound carrying through the open window like a promise. The fight wasn't over. Victor would appeal, would maneuver, would look for weaknesses to exploit. The 60-day evaluation period would bring its own challenges and stresses, but tonight they had won something real. Tonight, Emma and Oliver could sleep without fear of their father appearing without warning. Tonight, Lena could breathe without constantly looking over her shoulder. Tonight was enough. Tomorrow they would prepare for whatever came next. But tonight, they could simply exist in this moment of hard-won peace, surrounded by fireflies and children's laughter, and the quiet knowledge that sometimes the good guys did win, at least temporarily. And temporary victories, Daniel was learning, could build into something permanent if you fought for them hard enough and refused to surrender when things got difficult. He was prepared to fight for as long as it took. The 60 days that followed the court ruling stretched and compressed in unpredictable ways, some weeks crawling by with agonizing slowness, while others seemed to vanish overnight. Victor remained conspicuously absent from their daily lives, though his presence haunted the edges like a shadow that never quite disappeared. The supervised visitations happened in a sterile room at the Family Services Center downtown, monitored by a court-appointed observer named Patricia, who documented every interaction with clinical precision. Emma came home from the first visit pale and withdrawn, retreating to her room and refusing dinner. Lena sat with her daughter for an hour, finally coaxing out what had happened. Daddy kept asking why I was scared of him, Emma whispered, her rabbit clutched tight against her chest. He said he never hurt me, so why was I scared? And I didn't know what to say because he never hit me or anything, but I'm still scared, Mommy. Does that mean I'm bad? Lena's heart shattered and reformed in that moment, fury and love warring in her chest. No, baby, you're not bad. Being scared doesn't require hitting. Sometimes people hurt us in ways that don't leave bruises, and that's still real. That still matters. Patricia said I didn't have to answer questions that made me uncomfortable. She said I could just play with the toys instead. That's right. You never have to explain your feelings to someone who makes you feel unsafe. Daniel, listening from the doorway, added quietly, and being scared is your body's way of protecting you, Emma. It's like an alarm system. When someone makes you feel unsafe, that alarm goes off. That doesn't make you bad. That makes you smart for listening to it. Emma considered this, her 6-year-old mind working through complex emotional territory. Mason said his mom is watching over him even though she's gone. Do you think she'd think I'm doing okay? The question surprised Daniel, touched something tender in his chest. I think Mason's mom would think you're incredibly brave, and I know she'd be proud of Mason for being such a good friend to you. That seemed to settle something for Emma. She ate a little dinner, played briefly with Oliver, and went to bed without the nightmares that had plagued her previous nights. The psychological evaluations began in the third week, a series of appointments with Dr. Catherine Wells, a family psychologist with 30 years of experience and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd seen every manipulation tactic family court could offer. She met with Lena first, then Victor, then spent several sessions with Emma and Oliver in age-appropriate play therapy. How did it go? Daniel asked after Lena's second evaluation session. She'd been gone for 3 hours and returned looking emotionally exhausted. Exhausting. She asked questions that seem simple but make you examine everything. Why I married Victor. What attracted me initially. When I first recognized the control patterns. How I responded to them. Lena collapsed onto the couch beside him. She asked if I'd sought therapy before, and I had to explain that every time I tried, Victor would find the therapist and call them, claiming to be concerned about my mental health, trying to get information about our sessions. That's harassment of medical professionals. That's Victor finding loopholes. He never explicitly asked for session details, just expressed concern, asked if there was anything he should know to help support me. Made himself sound like the devoted, worried husband. Some therapists saw through it, others didn't. Eventually I stopped trying because it felt easier to just handle things myself than constantly worry about who Victor was manipulating. Did you tell Dr. Wells all that? Everything. She said it's textbook coercive control, that abusers often isolate victims from support systems, including mental health resources. Lena picked at a loose thread on the couch cushion. She also asked about you. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. What about me? About our relationship, how we met. Why I trusted you so quickly. Whether I have a pattern of jumping into relationships without proper judgment. Lena looked at him directly. I told her you were the first person in 2 years who believed me without question, who saw what was happening and didn't try to explain it away or suggest I was overreacting. I told her that sometimes trust isn't about time, it's about recognition. What did she say to that? She smiled and wrote something down. I have no idea if that's good or bad for our case. The waiting was the hardest part. Days blended together in a routine that felt both temporary and permanent. School runs and homework help, dinners around Daniel's kitchen table, evenings in the backyard watching fireflies as October gave way to November and the nights grew colder. Mason, Emma, and Oliver formed an inseparable unit, the kind of childhood friendship that develops when 3 kids are thrown together by circumstance and discover they actually enjoy each other's company. We should have a Thanksgiving plan, Lena said one evening in mid-November, 3 weeks before the follow-up court date. The custody order says Victor gets Thanksgiving this year, but with supervised visitation only. I don't know how that works. Daniel was helping Oliver with a puzzle, while Mason and Emma built an elaborate fort out of couch cushions. Have you asked Rebecca? She's checking with the court, but even if Victor gets a supervised Thanksgiving visit, it'll be at the Family Services Center, not at his house or his parents' place like he wanted. Lena wrapped her hands around her coffee mug in that habitual gesture Daniel had come to recognize as her self-soothing mechanism. His mother called me yesterday, first time she's contacted me in 6 months. What did she say? That I'm destroying her son's life. That I'm keeping her grandchildren from her out of spite. That the courts are biased against fathers, and I'm exploiting that bias. Lena's voice was flat, reciting the accusations without emotion. She said if I had any decency, I'd drop the protective order and let Victor see his children properly. What did you tell her? I told her that her son put a GPS tracker on my car and stalked us. That her grandchildren have nightmares about their father. That decency means protecting children, not exposing them to harm just to maintain family appearances. Lena set down her mug. Then I hung up and blocked her number. Good. Was it though? She's their grandmother. Emma and Oliver used to love visiting her. She'd bake cookies and let them help in the garden. But she's so blindly loyal to Victor that she can't see what he's become. Or maybe she always knew and just didn't care. Daniel reached across the table and took her hand. You can't sacrifice your children's well-being to maintain relationships with people who enable their father's behavior. That's not mean. That's boundaries. Boundaries still feel cruel sometimes. That's because you're kind. Kind people struggle with boundaries because they don't want to hurt anyone. But protecting your kids isn't cruel, even when it feels like it. Sarah from work had been relentlessly curious about the situation, sending Daniel text messages that ranged from genuinely concerned to nosily invasive. He'd given her the basic outline: blind date turned complicated, helping a friend through a custody battle, but avoided details that weren't his to share. "So are you two together now, or what?" Sarah texted one afternoon while Daniel was on break at the warehouse. "It's complicated," he typed back. That's what people say when they don't want to admit they're together, or it's what people say when the situation is actually complicated and doesn't fit into neat categories. "Do you want to be together?" Daniel stared at that question for a long moment. Did he? He'd been so focused on the immediate crisis, on protective orders and court dates, and making sure Lena and her children stayed safe, that he hadn't let himself consider what came after. What happened when the emergency phase ended and real life resumed? "I want her to have space to heal without pressure from anyone, including me," he finally typed. "Whatever happens after that, we'll figure out when we get there." "You're way more emotionally mature than I gave you credit for, Harper." "Thanks, I think. It's definitely a compliment. Most guys would be angling for the hero gets the girl ending. You're actually thinking about what she needs. She needs safety and stability. Everything else is secondary." "See? Emotionally mature. It's weird, and I'm not used to it." Daniel smiled and pocketed his phone. But Sarah's question lingered. He'd be lying if he said he hadn't thought about it, about what it might be like when the crisis passed and they could simply exist as two people who enjoyed each other's company rather than two people trapped in constant emergency mode. He'd noticed the way Lena laughed at his terrible jokes, the way she fit naturally into the routines of his household, the way she looked at him sometimes with an expression he couldn't quite name, but that made his chest feel warm and tight simultaneously. But he'd also noticed the way she still flinched at unexpected noises, the way she checked her phone obsessively for messages from Rebecca or the court, the way she held her children just a bit too tightly sometimes, as if afraid they might disappear. She was healing, but healing took time. And Daniel had learned through his own grief that you couldn't rush that process, couldn't force someone to be ready for what came next just because you wanted them to be. So he waited, and tried not to examine too closely what exactly he was waiting for. Dr. Wells submitted her evaluation report to the court in the first week of December, 4 days before the scheduled hearing. Rebecca called immediately after receiving her copy. "It's good, Lena. Really good." The lawyer's voice carried cautious optimism. Dr. Wells found no evidence of parental alienation. She noted that Emma and Oliver's fears appeared genuine and rooted in actual experiences rather than coached responses. She observed that both children are well-adjusted, emotionally healthy, and clearly bonded with you in secure attachment patterns. "And Victor?" Lena asked, her voice tight. "The report is less favorable for him." Dr. Wells noted narcissistic personality traits, difficulty accepting responsibility for his actions, and a pattern of externalizing blame. She recommended continued supervised visitation with mandatory therapy, focusing on respect for boundaries and emotional regulation. Rebecca paused. She also recommended that the protective order remain in place indefinitely, not just as a temporary measure. Lena's hand went to her mouth, muffling a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "She believes me." "She believes you, and more importantly, she documented everything in clinical language that courts take seriously. This is exactly what we needed, Lena." The hearing was scheduled for December 10th, exactly 60 days after Judge Freeman's initial ruling. Daniel took the day off work again, ignoring Tom's raised eyebrows and pointed questions about whether everything was okay at home. "Everything's fine," Daniel assured him. "Just helping a friend through some legal stuff." "Must be some friend for you to burn through your personal days like this." "She is." Tom studied him for a moment, then nodded. "All right. Just don't make it a habit. And Harper? Whatever you're doing, I hope it works out." The courthouse felt familiar now, less intimidating than it had 2 months ago. They found Rebecca in the same conference room, looking sharp and prepared, her briefcase full of documentation, including Dr. Wells's report and updated incident logs from the supervised visitations. Victor's team is going to argue that 60 days of supervised visitation is punishment enough, Rebecca warned. They'll push for a return to the original custody arrangement, claim he's learned his lesson and demonstrated appropriate behavior during the supervised visits. He hasn't done anything during the supervised visits, Lena pointed out. He just sits there making passive-aggressive comments about how unfair the situation is while Patricia writes everything down. Exactly. Which is actually good for us. It shows he hasn't internalized the need for change. He's just going through the motions. Rebecca checked her watch. We're on in 20 minutes. Any questions? Will Emma have to testify? Lena asked quietly. No. Dr. Wells's report includes her observations and statements. Judge Freeman won't put a 6-year-old on the stand unless absolutely necessary, and we have enough evidence without that. The courtroom was less crowded this time. No parade of witnesses, just the principals and their lawyers. Victor sat at the defense table looking composed but thinner than Daniel remembered, dark circles under his eyes suggesting the past 2 months hadn't been easy for him either. Judge Freeman took the bench promptly at 10 o'clock, and her first action was to review Dr. Wells's evaluation report. She read it in silence for several long minutes while both legal teams waited. This is a thorough evaluation, she said finally. Dr. Wells has extensive credentials and experience. I give significant weight to her findings. She looked at Victor's legal team. Mr. Thornton, your client was required to participate in individual therapy as part of the supervised visitation order. Has he complied? Thornton stood. Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Hale has attended weekly therapy sessions with Dr. Marcus Chen, a licensed psychologist. We can provide attendance records. I'm less interested in attendance than results. Has Dr. Chen provided a progress report? We have a letter from Dr. Chen stating that Mr. Hale is engaged in the therapeutic process and making progress in understanding the impact of his actions. Rebecca stood. Your Honor, we'd like to submit evidence that contradicts that characterization. During the supervised visitations, Mr. Hale has repeatedly minimized his behavior, suggested the court orders are unjust, and expressed no genuine understanding of why his children might feel unsafe around him. She handed documents to the bailiff, who delivered them to the judge. Freeman reviewed Patricia's visitation reports, her expression growing increasingly stern. These reports indicate that Mr. Hale spends significant time during supervised visits complaining about the unfairness of the situation rather than focusing on rebuilding trust with his children, Freeman noted. That doesn't suggest someone who's internalized the need for behavioral change. Your Honor, Thornton interjected, Mr. Hale is frustrated by the restrictions on his parental rights. That's a natural response to what he views as an unjust situation. Perhaps. But part of demonstrating fitness for unsupervised custody is showing that you can prioritize your children's needs above your own frustrations. Nothing in these reports suggests Mr. Hale is doing that. Freeman set the documents aside. I've also received an incident report from Hale Import Solutions regarding the misuse of company GPS equipment. Victor's composure flickered. Thornton looked uncomfortable. Your Honor, that's a separate corporate matter. That directly relates to the behavior that brought us here in the first place. The company's board found that Mr. Hale violated corporate policy, misused company resources for personal surveillance, and potentially exposed the business to legal liability. He's been placed on administrative leave pending further review. Freeman looked directly at Victor. That suggests your business partners take this matter more seriously than you appear to, Mr. Hale. Your Honor, Victor spoke for the first time, his voice strained. I made mistakes. I admit that. But my children are being kept from me based on those mistakes, and I've been working to address them. Doesn't that count for anything? It counts for something, Mr. Hale. But 60 days of supervised visitation doesn't erase 2 years of controlling behavior and harassment. Real change takes time to demonstrate. Freeman pulled out a legal pad and began writing. Here's my ruling. The protective order remains in place indefinitely. It can be reviewed in 6 months if Mr. Hale can demonstrate sustained behavioral change, including therapy progress and respect for boundaries. Victor's hands clenched on the table. Custody arrangements continue as currently structured, supervised visitation 1 4-hour session per week. However, I'm adding requirements. Mr. Hale must continue individual therapy weekly, and provide monthly progress reports from his therapist. He must also complete a parenting course focused on emotional intelligence and healthy co-parenting. Once those requirements are met, we can discuss transitioning to unsupervised visitation in neutral locations. Your Honor, Thornton stood. With respect, this is overly restrictive for a father who hasn't been accused of physical abuse. Mr. Thornton, psychological abuse is abuse. Control is abuse. Creating an environment where children are afraid is abuse, even if no one ever raises a hand. Freeman's voice was sharp. I've reviewed Dr. Wells's evaluation. I've seen the evidence of stalking, harassment, and intimidation. I've read the statements from Emma about her nightmares and Oliver's regression behaviors. This court will not restore unsupervised access until there's clear evidence that Mr. Hale can put his children's emotional well-being ahead of his need for control. She signed the order with firm strokes. Ms. Whitmore, the protective order gives you legal backing to enforce boundaries. Use it. If Mr. Hale violates any terms, contact authorities immediately. Document everything, as you've been doing. Yes, Your Honor, thank you. Freeman looked at Victor one more time. Mr. Hale, I genuinely hope you use this time to do the work necessary to be the father your children need. But that requires genuine self-reflection, not just going through the motions to satisfy court requirements. Your children deserve better. They deserve their father, Victor said, his voice tight with barely suppressed anger. They deserve a father who makes them feel safe. Right now you're not that father. Prove me wrong. Freeman banged her gavel. Court is adjourned. We'll reconvene in 6 months to review progress. The courtroom emptied slowly. Victor left immediately, flanked by his lawyers, his posture rigid with fury. Daniel noticed Thornton speaking urgently to him in the hallway, probably warning him against any impulsive actions. Lena sat frozen at the table, staring at the judge's signed order as if she couldn't quite believe it was real. You did it, Rebecca said softly. You protected your kids. It's really over? For now at least? 6 months of breathing room at minimum. And if Victor doesn't comply with the requirements, it could be even longer before he gets unsupervised access. Rebecca gathered her files. You should celebrate, Lena. This was a hard fight, and you won. Outside, December sunlight painted the courthouse steps in pale gold. Lena stood at the top, looking out at the city, and Daniel saw her shoulders gradually relax, years of tension finally releasing. I can't believe it, she said quietly. I actually have legal protection, actual boundaries that he can't cross without consequences. You earned this. We earned this. You, me, Rebecca, everyone who believed me when it would have been easier not to. She turned to face him, and Daniel saw tears streaming down her face. But they were good tears this time, relief rather than fear. I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done. You don't need to thank me. You just need to live your life without looking over your shoulder. That's thanks enough. They picked up the children from Mrs. Patterson, who'd become unofficial grandmother to all 3 kids over the past months. She'd heard about the hearing outcome, news traveled fast in their small neighborhood, and had baked celebration cookies. You did good, dear, she told Lena, patting her hand with age-spotted fingers. Standing up to bullies is never easy, but you did it. Those children are lucky to have you. Emma and Oliver were confused about why everyone seemed happy, but tried to match the energy, eating cookies and asking if this meant they could have extra TV time. Mason, who understood more than the younger kids, gave his father a knowing look. So things are better now? He asked quietly while the others were distracted. Things are better. Not perfect, but better. Does that mean Emma and Oliver are staying? It was the question Daniel had been avoiding. With the immediate crisis resolved, did Lena still need to stay at his house? Or would she want to reclaim her independence, find her own space, build a life separate from the emergency that had thrown them together? I don't know, Bud. That's up to their mom. Mason looked disappointed but nodded. I hope they stay. It's more fun with them here. That evening, after the children were asleep, Daniel and Lena sat on the back porch despite the December cold, wrapped in blankets and nursing hot chocolate. The fireflies were gone now, replaced by the stark beauty of bare tree branches against a clear winter sky. I should start looking for an apartment, Lena said, breaking the comfortable silence. You've been incredibly generous letting us stay this long, but we can't live in your guest room forever. Daniel felt something twist in his chest but kept his voice neutral. You're not living in the guest room. You're staying with friends during a difficult time. A difficult time that's lasted almost 3 months. Daniel, you've put your life on hold for us. You've used up your personal days at work. You've turned your house upside down for 3 people you barely knew. That's beyond friendship. That's martyrdom. I'm not a martyr, and I haven't put my life on hold. If anything, having you here has made my life fuller. He paused, choosing his words carefully. But if you need space, if you need to reclaim your independence after years of not having it, I understand. You should do what feels right for you. Lena pulled her blanket tighter. The thing is, I don't know what feels right anymore. For 2 years I've been in survival mode, just trying to keep me and the kids safe, keep moving, keep fighting. I never thought about what came after, what life looked like once the immediate danger passed. So take time to figure it out. No pressure, no timeline. Stay until you know what you want next. What if what I want is complicated? Daniel's heart rate picked up. Complicated how? Lena turned to look at him directly, her eyes reflecting the porch light. What if what I want is to stay here? Not in the guest room as a temporary refugee, but actually stay. Build something real. With you. The words hung in the cold air between them, vulnerable and honest. Is that what you want? Daniel asked carefully. Or is that gratitude and trauma bonding talking? I've thought about that. A lot. I've even talked to Dr. Wells about it during my sessions, whether my feelings are genuine or just attachment to someone who helped me during crisis. Lena set down her mug. And here's what I know. I like who I am when I'm around you. I like the way you make me laugh even when everything's terrible. I like the way you see Emma and Oliver as actual people, not just accessories to me. I like the way Mason looks up to you and the way you've taught him kindness by example. I like the life we've accidentally built here over these past months. That's a lot of likes. I know, which is why I'm terrified. Because what if I'm wrong? What if this is just proximity and adrenaline? What if we try to make it something real and it falls apart? And I lose not just a relationship, but the safety you've given us? Daniel reached across the space between them and took her hand. Or what if you're right? What if what we've built is actually real and sustainable? What if the fact that it started during crisis doesn't make it less genuine? How do we know which one it is? We don't. Not with certainty. But Lena, I've spent 4 years being safe, building a comfortable, predictable life for me and Mason that couldn't hurt us because we never took risks. And then you knocked on my door with your kids in the car, and everything got messy and complicated and absolutely terrifying. And I've never felt more alive. Lena's grip on his hand tightened. So what are you saying? I'm saying that I don't have all the answers either. I don't know if this is smart or reckless. I don't know if we're ready or if we need more time to heal first. But I know that I don't want you to leave just because you think you should. If you want to go, if you need space to figure yourself out without my proximity clouding things, then go. I'll support that. But if you want to stay, if you want to see what this could become when we're not just surviving but actually living, I want that too. Even though it's complicated? Especially because it's complicated. The best things usually are. They sat in silence for a moment, hands clasped, the magnitude of the conversation settling between them. I need time, Lena said finally. Not time away. Just time to be sure. Time to heal enough that I can trust my own judgment. Time to let the kids adjust to stability before adding more change to their lives. That's fair. That's smart even. But I want to stay while I figure it out, if that's okay with you. More than okay. And we take it slow. No pressure, just see how it unfolds. Slow is good. Slow is safe. Lena laughed softly. Nothing about this situation has been safe. True, but we can start now. Christmas came 3 weeks later, and Daniel's modest house filled with the chaos of 3 children discovering presents and eating too much sugar and building elaborate scenarios with their new toys. Lena had gotten a job at a small design studio that appreciated her skills and didn't seem concerned about her complicated recent history. Emma and Oliver continued their supervised visits with Victor, coming home each time a little more confident, a little less afraid as they learned that their father couldn't hurt them as long as boundaries existed. Mason turned 9 in January, and they threw him a party that included not just his school friends, but Emma and Oliver, who'd become as integral to the celebration as anyone. Mrs. Patterson made her famous chocolate cake. Sarah from work came with her family and spent the whole time giving Daniel significant looks and whispering to Lena like they were old friends plotting something elaborate. "Your coworker is subtle as a brick," Lena commented after Sarah left. "She means well. She just has no concept of boundaries. Remind me not to hire her at the design studio." February brought Valentine's Day, which Mason and Emma decided required elaborate preparations, including handmade cards for everyone and a special dinner that the kids insisted on cooking themselves. The resulting meal was barely edible, but created with such enthusiasm that Daniel and Lena ate every bite and declared it delicious. "Do you think they're trying to set us up?" Lena whispered while the children cleaned the kitchen with more water than actual cleaning. "I think they're 8, 6, and 4, and they like the idea of their families combining because it means they get to stay together." That's incredibly mature reasoning for children. They're wise beyond their years, probably from dealing with adult situations too young. That's depressing. Or it's hopeful. They've been through hard things and they're still kind, still optimistic, still capable of joy. That's not nothing. March brought the 6-month review hearing, but it was anticlimactic compared to previous court dates. Victor had completed the parenting course, but his therapy progress reports were mixed. Dr. Chen noted that while Victor attended sessions regularly, he struggled with genuine self-reflection and continued to externalize blame for the situation. Judge Freeman ruled that supervised visitation would continue for another 6 months, with review at that time. Victor's response was muted, acceptance rather than rage. Whether that signaled genuine growth or simple exhaustion, Daniel couldn't tell. But the important thing was that he complied with the order, showed up for his supervised visits, and gradually, slowly, began to focus less on his own grievances and more on actually connecting with his children during their limited time together. "I think he might actually be trying," Lena said after Emma reported that Daddy had asked about her school project and listened to her explain her science fair experiment without interrupting. "Not succeeding yet, but trying. That's progress, small but real. Do you think he'll ever actually change? Or is this just performance for the court? I think people can change if they want to badly enough. Whether Victor wants to is still unclear. But the important thing is that Emma and Oliver are safe while we find out." Spring arrived with sudden warmth, and the backyard that had hosted fireflies last fall now filled with flowers Daniel hadn't realized he'd planted. Lena, who apparently had a secret talent for gardening, transformed the neglected flower beds into something beautiful. The children played in dirt and discovered worms and argued about which flowers were best, and life settled into something that felt remarkably normal. One evening in late April, almost exactly 8 months after that first blind date, Daniel found Lena in the backyard deadheading roses while the children played in the treehouse Mason's father had built years ago. "I've been thinking," she said without preamble, "about us, about what this is." Daniel's stomach tightened with anticipation and fear. And I think I'm ready to stop calling it complicated. I think I'm ready to just call it what it is. Which is? Lena set down her gardening shears and turned to face him fully. "Home. Your home. This house, Mason, our accidentally blended family, all of it, it's home. And I don't want to leave just because some arbitrary timeline says I should have my own space by now. Arbitrary timelines are overrated anyway. I'm serious, Daniel. I want to stay. Not as a guest or a refugee or someone temporarily borrowing your life. As someone who's building a life here, with you. If you still want that." Daniel pulled her close, garden dirt and all, and kissed her properly for the first time since that frozen evening last December when they'd first acknowledged what was building between them. It felt like coming home and stepping into something new simultaneously. "I want that," he said when they finally broke apart. "I've wanted that for months, but didn't want to pressure you." "Well, consider me unpressured in making this choice entirely of my own free will and sound judgment." "Your sound judgment that initially thought showing up to a blind date with kids in the car was a good idea? That sound judgment brought me here, didn't it? So clearly it's better than we give it credit for." From the treehouse came Mason's voice. "Are they kissing?" "I think they're kissing." Finally, Emma's voice carried clearly. "I've been waiting forever." "What's kissing?" Oliver asked, confused. "It's what grown-ups do when they like each other. Emma explained with the authority of her 6 years. Dad likes Ms. Lena. Mason sounded delighted. Apparently he does, Daniel called up to the treehouse. Everyone okay with that? A chorus of enthusiastic affirmatives answered him. Well then, Lena said, laughing. I guess we have the children's blessing. That's all that really matters anyway. Summer arrived in full force, bringing long days and short nights and plans for vacation that had seemed impossible last fall. They rented a beach house for a week in July, just the 5 of them, and spent 7 days building sandcastles and swimming in waves and eating ice cream for breakfast, because vacation rules trumped regular rules. On the last evening, sitting on the beach watching the sunset while the children searched for shells, Lena said quietly, Do you remember that first night when I showed up at your door completely panicked because my kids were hungry and I didn't know what else to do? I remember thinking you looked terrified and brave simultaneously. I was. I kept thinking this was the worst first date in history, and you were going to tell me to leave and never contact you again. And instead I invited you in for tacos. Best tacos I've ever had. She leaned against his shoulder. Do you think if things had been different, if I'd shown up without the drama, if we just had a normal date, do you think we would have ended up here? Daniel considered the question honestly. I don't know, maybe, but I think the crisis forced us to skip past all the surface stuff and get to the real parts faster. There's something about facing hard things together that builds connection in ways regular dating can't. So you're saying my disaster of a life was actually romantic fate? I'm saying that sometimes the best things come from the most unlikely circumstances, and I wouldn't change any of it, even the scary parts, because it brought us here. Emma ran up with a perfect spiral shell, demanding that Lena admire it. Oliver followed with a handful of sand he insisted was special beach sand that needed to come home with them. Mason had found a piece of driftwood he declared was definitely from a pirate ship and absolutely necessary for his room. Normal kid chaos. Normal family moments, the kind of ordinary, beautiful life that had seemed impossible just months ago. The 6-month review in September brought the news they'd hoped for. Victor's therapy reports showed genuine progress. He joined a men's support group focused on healthy relationships and was reportedly doing real work examining his controlling behaviors. Dr. Chen recommended transitioning to unsupervised visits in neutral locations, parks, restaurants, family-friendly venues where the children felt safe. Judge Freeman approved the recommendation with stipulations. The protective order remained in place. Victor could not take the children to his home or his parents' home without supervision for another 6 months. All visits had to be documented with check-in and check-out times, but he could finally spend time with Emma and Oliver outside the sterile visitation center. How do you feel about it? Daniel asked Lena after the hearing. Terrified, hopeful, worried, relieved, all of it simultaneously. She watched Victor talk quietly with his lawyer in the courthouse hallway, and Daniel saw something in her expression he hadn't seen before. Not fear, but pity. He looks tired, older. Accountability and actual consequences will do that. Do you think he's really changed, or just learned to hide the control better? I think only time will tell. But the difference is now there are systems in place. If he backslides, there are immediate consequences. And Emma and Oliver are old enough now to speak up if something doesn't feel right. The first unsupervised visit happened at a park on a Saturday afternoon. Emma and Oliver went with cautious optimism, fortified by the promise that Lena would be nearby if they needed her. Daniel drove them to the park, watched Victor arrive looking nervous and uncertain, and observed from a distance as the children approached their father with careful wariness. 2 hours later, Emma and Oliver returned tired but okay. Not traumatized, not terrified, just tired the way kids get after running around a playground. Daddy played on the swings with us, Emma reported, and he didn't ask about why we're scared of him or anything. He just played. Did you have fun? Lena asked carefully. It was okay. Not as fun as when we play with Mason and Daniel, but okay. Okay is good, sweetheart. Okay is a good start. The visits continued monthly, gradually building towards something that looked like co-parenting. It wasn't perfect. Victor still struggled with boundaries, still occasionally made comments that suggested he didn't fully understand the impact of his past behavior. But he was trying, and the children were gradually learning that they could have a relationship with their father that didn't require them to sacrifice their sense of safety. Thanksgiving that year was chaos in the best possible way. Daniel's house filled with people, Lena's parents, who'd been estranged during her marriage to Victor but reconnected after the divorce, Mrs. Patterson from across the street, Sarah and her family, Marcus and his partner. The dining room table was too small, so they set up a second table in the living room, and the children ate at their own table in the kitchen, arguing about who got the wishbone. "This is what family is supposed to look like," Lena's mother said quietly, watching the chaos with tears in her eyes. Not the quiet, controlled dinners at Victor's parents' house where everyone was afraid to speak. This, messy and loud and full of life. "I'm sorry we lost so much time," Lena said. "You're here now. That's what matters." December brought another Christmas, this time without the shadow of court dates and custody battles. Emma and Oliver would spend Christmas Eve with Victor in a supervised visit at his sister's house, a compromise everyone could live with. Christmas Day belonged to the family they'd built. On Christmas morning, while the children tore through presents with gleeful abandon, Daniel pulled Lena aside. "I have something for you, but I wanted to give it to you privately." She looked curious and nervous. "Should I be worried?" "Depends on your answer." He handed her a small box and watched her face cycle through surprise, shock, and tears as she opened it to find a simple gold ring. "Daniel, before you panic, this isn't a proposal. Not yet, anyway." He took her hand. "It's a promise. A promise that I'm in this for real. That what we've built matters to me. That when you're ready, if you're ready, I'll ask properly. But for now, this is just me saying that you're not temporary, Lena. You're permanent. You and Emma and Oliver. This is our family, and I want everyone to know it." Lena slipped the ring on her right hand and pulled him into a kiss that tasted like tears and hope and coffee and home. "I love you," she whispered. "I should have said it months ago, but I was scared." "I love you too, and for the record, I've been terrified the entire time." "That makes me feel better somehow." "Good. We can be terrified together." From the living room came Mason's voice. "Mom and Dad are kissing again. That's like the 5th time today." "6th, Emma corrected. "I've been counting." "Why are they kissing so much?" Oliver asked. "Because they're in love, dummy," Emma said with exasperation. "Pay attention." Daniel and Lena returned to the living room to find 3 children grinning at them with expressions that suggested they'd orchestrated this entire thing somehow. "We were not that subtle, were we?" Lena murmured. "Not even a little bit." Spring arrived again, marking a full year since that first chaotic Friday evening. Emma was 7 now, Oliver was 5, and Mason had just turned 10. The supervised visitations with Victor had transitioned to regular unsupervised custody, 1 weekend a month and alternating holidays. He'd completed another year of therapy and was in what Dr. Chen called sustained recovery from his controlling behaviors. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments when Victor pushed boundaries, when Lena had to firmly redirect him, when the children came home needing reassurance. But it was manageable. It was healing. It was proof that sometimes people could change when the consequences were real and the accountability consistent. In May, Daniel proposed properly, on the back porch where they'd had so many late-night conversations, with the children hiding in the bushes trying not to giggle, with fireflies just beginning their seasonal appearance. Lena said yes before he finished asking, and the children erupted from their hiding spots to celebrate with such enthusiasm that Mrs. Patterson called from across the street to make sure everyone was okay. They married in August in a simple ceremony in the backyard, surrounded by everyone who'd helped them through the past year. Mason, Emma, and Oliver served as the wedding party, arguing about the proper way to hold flowers and whether the ring-bearer pillow was fancy enough. Victor was not invited, but sent a card wishing them well, which felt like progress. "Do you ever think about that first night?" Mason asked during the reception, watching his father dance with Lena while Emma and Oliver attempted to teach Mrs. Patterson the latest TikTok dance. "When Ms. Lena showed up and everything changed." "I think about it all the time," Daniel admitted. "Dad, was it scary, taking in a whole family like that?" "Terrifying." "But you did it anyway." "Sometimes the right thing and the scary thing are the same thing. You just have to decide which matters more." Mason considered this with the seriousness of a 10-year-old philosopher. "I'm glad you picked the right thing." "Me too, bud. Me too." As evening settled and the reception wound down, Daniel found himself on that same back porch where so much had happened. Lena joined him, still in her simple white dress, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "We did it," she said softly. "We actually built something real from all that chaos." "You sound surprised." I am. A little. A year ago, I was hiding from my ex-husband in your guest room, convinced I'd never feel safe again. And now, look at us. Married, blended family, actual stability. It wasn't always pretty. The best things rarely are. She clinked her glass against his. But we did it anyway. From inside the house came the sound of children laughing, music playing, friends celebrating. Normal sounds of a normal life that had seemed impossible not so long ago. Daniel thought about that Friday evening last September when he'd opened his door, expecting an awkward blind date, and found instead a terrified woman with children waiting in the car. He thought about the choice he'd made in that moment, to invite them in, to offer safety, to step into the chaos instead of away from it. It had been the scariest, most reckless, most right decision of his life. "Hey," Lena said, pulling him back to the present. "Where'd you go?" "Just remembering the beginning, that first night when you whispered that the kids were in the car and hadn't eaten. I was so embarrassed. So sure you'd send us away. And instead I invited you in for tacos. Best decision you ever made." She kissed him softly. "Second only to marrying me. That's definitely top 2. They stood there together on the porch, watching fireflies paint the darkening yard with brief golden moments, listening to their children laugh inside, surrounded by the life they'd built from courage and kindness and the willingness to step into fear when someone needed help. It wasn't the ending either of them had expected, but it was the ending they'd earned, messy and complicated and absolutely perfect in its imperfection. And really, Daniel thought as Lena's hand found his in the gathering darkness, what more could anyone ask for than a home built on protection, trust, and the quiet certainty that sometimes the best families are the ones you choose when life gives you impossible choices, and you choose love anyway. The fireflies continued their dance, the children continued their laughter, and the future stretched ahead full of ordinary, beautiful moments waiting to be lived. And that, Daniel knew, was more than enough. It was everything.